Take a deep breath. Let the weight of the day fall away. You're not in your room anymore. Not in the 21st century with humming machines and glowing screens. Instead, imagine yourself somewhere older, somewhere colder, in the rolling forest-fringed hills of 11th century Saxony, where mist clings low to the ground and the sky is the color of wet wool. The air smells of wood smoke, damp earth, and a faint tang of livestock. It is a world defined by cycles you cannot escape, ruled not by laws of choice, but by rhythms of land and obligation. This is not a story of kings and queens, but of the forgotten. Of those born to serve and die in the shadows of timber halls and stone chapels. It is the story of a serf. Tonight, we will follow their footsteps. Through muddy fields and smoky huts, through harsh winters and whispered rebellions, through the rituals that governed their faith and the fleeting dreams that sometimes stirred in the cold quiet of night. We will walk through this world not with urgency, but with care, slowly, gently, not to judge, but to understand. There is no need to stay fully awake. Let the rhythm of their days and the weight of their burdens carry you into rest. Let your mind drift through the folds of wool cloaks, the creak of cartwheels, the flicker of tallow candles in a wooden church. We begin with the soil. Because in Saxony, as in so many places in medieval Europe, everything began with the soil, even suffering. Chapter 1. Digging frozen fields for someone else's grain. The rooster doesn't crow to wake you. It crows because it can. But you were already stirring in the dark, half asleep, under the weight of a lice-ridden wool blanket. Your bones ache, not from sickness, but from routine. Your hut is little more than a timber frame plastered with daub and wattle, and the cold slips through it without resistance. The hearth has long since cooled. You rise anyway. You always do. Outside, the fields are white with frost. Your breath fogs in the air. The soil is hard, almost resentful. The winter is not yet full, but the ground is already stiff with ice. Your boots are patched with scraps of old leather. They keep your feet dry for a few hours, no more. A wooden spade rests on your shoulder as you walk the familiar path to the Lord's field. Not yours. Nothing is truly yours. The land, the tools, even your time belongs to someone else. A serf does not own. A serf serves. You walk past others in silence. A boy with a limp. A woman with hollow cheeks. They do not smile. The only sounds are the crunch of frost and a low murmur of oxen breath as they stand yoked and waiting. The Lord's reeve counts the heads, always watching, always making note. You nod though you avoid his eyes. There were rumors last night that someone had stolen a sack of grain. The reeve is not known for mercy. By mid-morning, your hands have gone from cold to numb to something worse. The spade's handle chews into your palms. You break the surface of the earth swing after swing, lifting clods of stubborn soil, frozen at the edges, damp beneath. You don't know where this wheat will go. Maybe to a monastery, maybe to market, but it won't feed your family. Not directly. You're allowed to share later, after everyone else has taken what they want. The work is relentless. Bending, lifting, bending again. If you slow, the reeve might see. If you complain, there's the lash. So instead, you think about the next pause. A moment to drink from the leather pouch tied at your waist. A crust of rye bread in your pocket, chewed slowly as you crouch in the wind shadow of a cart. You hear someone coughing, a deep, rasping sound, and you don't turn to look. You already know. There's no remedy for what ails people like you. Afternoon brings no change in rhythm. Only the sun shifting slightly behind thin clouds. The wind picks up. Your fingers bleed, but only slightly, and there's a kind of comfort in that. At least it means they haven't frozen yet. When the workday ends, it isn't because the labor is done. It's because the light fails. You trudge back to the village, your legs heavy. The firewood you gather on the way is damp, but it will have to do. Children run past you, barefoot in the cold, chasing a makeshift ball of rags. Their laughter is tin, like something borrowed from another world. At home, your wife stirs the pot. It is barley again, a little cabbage. Maybe a shred of lard if you're lucky. You eat in silence, except for the sound of chewing and the occasional groan from the elder who lives with you. She hasn't stood in weeks. You don't know how much longer she'll hold on. Later, when the fire crackles low and the wind slips through the cracks in the wall, you lie back and stare at the ceiling. The thatch above you sways slightly. You wonder how long it will hold before the next leak forms. Your hands twitch in your sleep. Even there, the labor continues. Dreams of soil, of breaking earth, of sowing seeds that belong to another man. You fall asleep not with peace, but with exhaustion. And in the world of a Saxon serf, that's as close as you get. The depths of Saxony's feudal hierarchy, time passes slowly. Not in measured hours, but in cycles of toil and fatigue. For the serf, there are no clocks, only the shifting light and the rhythm of the seasons. And while each day might blur into the next, the work never truly stops. The Lord's grain still needs harvesting. Even in the coldest weeks, there are stones to clear, tools to mend, and livestock to tend. The land, indifferent and unyielding, demands loyalty that is never rewarded. Sometimes, the worst of the labor doesn't happen in the field at all, but in the mind. The knowledge that this life is not temporary, not a stepping stone, but a sentence. You were born here, you will live here, and you will likely die here, having spent a lifetime sowing someone else's future. Serfs were tied to the land, legally and spiritually. You could not leave without permission. You could not marry without approval. You could not dream without punishment, though no one called it that. They called it custom. They called it duty. On some days, the field work includes hauling manure from the barns to spread over the Lord's crops. The scent is heavy, clinging to your clothes and skin even after you wash, though water is too precious to waste on bathing. Soap is almost unheard of, and your skin cracks with cold and filth. When you carry the dung, it steams faintly in the winter air, a reminder that even rot has more warmth than your home. Yet you carry it all the same, because no one else will. The tools you use are crude. A wooden plow. Iron tips if you're lucky, though most are worn and dulled with age. If the oxen are sick or if they've died, you take their place. 2 men hold the blade while another guides. The soil doesn't care what breaks it, only that it breaks. Your shoulders bruise, your knees sink in the thawing muck. And always the reeve watches. The Lord's man, whose word carries weight, but whose eyes carry no sympathy. If your labor isn't needed in the Lord's field, you may be sent to the forest. There, you gather firewood, though never more than your allotment. Taking more is theft, and the penalties for theft are not light. Fingers can be taken, so can hands. Or if the Lord feels merciful, it might be a day in the stocks, a public display of shame, with villagers jeering as you shiver. You might prefer the lash, at least that pain is private. Occasionally, the Lord Steward visits the fields to inspect progress. He rides while you kneel in the mud. He speaks Latin or Norman French, words that mean nothing to you, but that sound heavy with judgment. If he is displeased, the punishment comes quickly. Fewer rest days, greater quotas. No explanation needed. You are not a person in his eyes, but a function, a tool with legs, yet not all cruelty wears armor. Some days, the wind alone is your enemy. It rips through the valley, numbing your face and turning breath into frost. Fingers lose feeling, eyes water. The soil becomes a cruel slab, impossible to till. But still you work, because the alternative is worse. You do not work for food, but for permission to live. To stop is to be punished. To rest is to risk everything. The field becomes a mirror of your life, unforgiving, repetitive, and always someone else's. Sometimes a bird sings, a crow, or a finch in a bare tree. Its sound cuts the silence and reminds you there's a world beyond these rows of brown and white. It's a cruel reminder, really. That freedom exists, but not for you. You think about running. Every serf does. You've heard of towns to the west? Places where a man could be free if he lived there for a year and a day. But no one you know has ever returned to confirm this story. The few who've tried are caught quickly. And when they're caught, their punishment is made public, humiliating, painful, permanent. By late evening, you gather with others to share news. Someone's son has fallen ill. A woman lost her pregnancy in the fields. The village priest offered prayers, but little else. He has no medicine, just blessings. And a firm reminder that suffering draws you closer to heaven. You nod along, though your heart feels hollow. Heaven sounds far away. On rare occasions, there is music, a pipe carved from bone, a drum made from stretched hide. The rhythm is soft, hypnotic. It isn't joy you feel, but something older, a memory of joy, or the hope of it. Children dance barefoot in the snow, their feet red with cold. Elders hum half-forgotten songs. You smile, just a little. For one brief moment, it doesn't feel like servitude. When night comes again, the sky is clear and sharp with stars. The cold wraps around your home like a second skin. Inside, the fire flickers low, barely more than a whisper of heat. You lie close to your family, curled like animals in a nest. Sleep comes slowly, dragging behind it the aches of your body. You dream of spring, not because it's warm, but because it means the end of winter's cruel silence. Even if it brings more work, it will at least bring light. In 11th century Saxony, hope is not a grand thing. It's small. A warm bowl of broth, a full moon over the hills, a good boot, a day without punishment. The field will be waiting tomorrow, hard and patient, and you will go, because you must. That is the life of a serf, one step, one breath, one swing of a spade at a time. You never stop to ask why. You simply endure. Chapter 2. Mud walls and straw roofs. Life inside a serf's hut. You return from the fields as twilight settles over the village, your shoulders stiff and your boots trailing clumps of wet earth. The road home is not a road at all, but a rutted path lined with deep puddles and the occasional patch of dung. No one has ever bothered to drain this land properly. And when it rains, which it often does in Saxony, the ground swells and floods, soaking everything in its reach. One for sleeping, one for eating, one for work, all pressed together like layers of wool on a cold night. Dinner is what was left over from the morning. A weak broth made from cabbage leaves, a few wilted greens, and a heel of barley bread, hard enough to crack a tooth. You chew slowly, not from choice, but necessity. It keeps out most of the rain, but not all of it. Drips form in the corners. A steady drop lands in the same place every night, hitting an old pot that's been placed to catch it. You call the old woman from the next hut, the one with the bundle of herbs and the hands that tremble when she walks. A child's joke, a shared memory, a song hummed softly as someone sharpens a blade. But more often, there's silence. Not uncomfortable, just tired. You stretch your limbs and settle into the straw, pulling your child a little closer. There's no comfort in this life, not really. Only repetition. Only small moments carved out of long, cold nights. The kind of silence that fills up the place over time, like snow piling against the wall. She knows what to do with fever. With coughing fits. With the chill that sometimes sets in and never leaves, but she can't cure everything. No one can. When someone dies, the body is laid out by the fire for one night, wrapped in a rough wool sheet before it's carried to the churchyard. You've done this twice, for your father and your younger sister, who died in spring, just after the lambs were born. You still remember how small she looked, even in death. Like the world had simply folded her up and carried her away. You've stopped noticing the sound. It's just part of the house now, like the creak of the beams when the wind pushes hard, or the scratching of mice in the walls. An owl hoots once, then falls quiet. Your neighbor's door slams shut in the wind, and still your hut stands. A thin shell against the vast dark. Fragile, yet enduring. It's not much. But it's home, and for now, it holds. Sometimes when the moon is full, a bit of light filters through the gaps in the roof, catching on the floating bits of dust. It's beautiful in its own way. Quiet, almost holy. You stretch every bite. The children get more than you do. They always do. The eldest watches the pot closely, not out of greed, but out of instinct. He understands what it means when food runs low. You've taught him without ever needing to speak it aloud. You sleep beside your children, your mother-in-law, and sometimes even the animals if they need shelter. Occasionally, someone slurps too loudly and earns a look, but no one scolds. What matters is eating before the fire dies again. Once it does, the hut will grow cold in minutes. The only text you've ever seen is in the priest's hand, scrawled in Latin and meant only for God or the literate few. Stories are told, not read, and they're not fanciful. They're warnings. Tales of sinners swallowed by bogs, of men who forgot to honor the saints and were struck blind, of women who entered the woods alone and were never seen again. You tell these stories not to scare your children, but to protect them. They learn early what to fear, what to respect, and what never to question. And everyone will huddle together under one moth-eaten blanket, shoulders pressed tight. The chickens nest in a corner behind a screen of reeds. A pig snores just beyond the threshold. Its warmth, though pungent, is welcome in winter. When you lie down, it's on straw strewn across wooden boards, sometimes softened by old linen if there's any to spare. The straw has to be replaced often. It gets wet. It gets moldy. And it always gets bugs. The homes ahead huddle together like sheep in the cold. Roofs bowed beneath thick thatch. Walls dark with moisture. There are no lanterns, no cheerful windows glowing in the dusk. Just the low, smoky smell of peat fires and the soft bleating of goats penned close to the doors. Your hut is one of dozens, indistinguishable from the rest, unless you know which one is yours. Built by hand, passed from parent to child like a pair of worn boots, it leans slightly to the left and moans in the wind. The door doesn't latch properly. It never has. You step inside, ducking your head beneath the low wooden beam, and breathe in the familiar mix of smoke, damp straw, and something faintly sour. It isn't pleasant, but it isn't alarming. Just ordinary. The floor is packed dirt, uneven and pockmarked from years of use. A simple hearth dominates the center of the space, a shallow depression lined with stones. The fire has long since died down, but your wife is there, coaxing it back to life with careful breaths and a fistful of kindling. Sparks flutter up into the rafters, briefly illuminating the soot-darkened ceiling beams and the smoke that clings just under the roof. You've never seen the sky from your bed. Only this swirling, hazy fog that blurs everything above your head. There are no rooms, just space. Hunger is a quiet constant. Not loud or dramatic. Just a hollow that never entirely disappears. There's no table. Just a flat board balanced on two stumps, where bowls carved from wood sit in a row. No forks, only knives and hands. The roof above is thick with thatch, carefully packed and weighted with stones. There are no books here. No writing of any kind. When someone falls ill, you don't call a doctor. There are moments of laughter, but they're brief. Outside, the night deepens. Dogs bark in the distance. Inside your mind, the warmth of the hearth flickers and fades. Tomorrow, you'll rise again. You always do. As the fire flickers down to its last orange breath, your body relaxes under the scratchy wool, but your thoughts don't sleep easily. In this life, there is no privacy. Not in thought. You live shoulder to shoulder, breath to breath with your family. There's no mattress, no pillow, just your folded cloak and the heat of others. Someone is stirring the fire, someone else is lacing their shoes, and a third is whispering prayers in a corner, hoping the saints are listening today. There are days when the rain doesn't stop, turning roads into rivers and keeping you locked inside. Not just yours, but those of neighbors visiting, bringing what little they can, a bit of dried meat, a scrap of cheese, a gourd of ale. Laughter echoes in the rafters, awkward and brief. These are rare days when hunger is pushed back just far enough to allow something like celebration. The closest thing to comfort is the stool your grandfather carved by hand, its legs uneven but smooth from generations of use. You sometimes run your fingers over the notches in the wood, feeling the grooves he made, perhaps as he too sat beside the fire, wondering how much longer he could endure this life. Each crack, each patch of mold. In the coldest weeks, you stuff the gaps with straw or rags. It helps a little. But you've seen nights where the water inside the bowl freezes while you sleep. When you wake, you break the surface with a stick and drink it anyway. The cold never really leaves you. It seeps into your bones and stays. It's the only inheritance you left behind. And as you curl once more onto the straw bed, your hands folded under your cheek, you do not ask for more, only for warmth, only for sleep, only for one more quiet night under this sagging roof within these muddy walls. Planning is for those with freedom. Your children may grow, may marry, may inherit your patch of soil and your broken spade, but they will live as you do and as your father did before you. The stars are sharp and cold. The moon bathes the hut in pale light. For a moment, everything feels still. Beautiful, even. You almost forget the mud under your feet, the weight in your back, the hunger gnawing at your stomach. But then the baby cries, or the wind picks up, or the fire sputters out, and the spell breaks. You return inside, duck your head once more beneath the low beam, and become part of the hut again. Not just a person within it, but a part of its wood and stone, its smoke and silence. There's no shame in that. But there's no pride either. Just continuity. You teach them the skills they'll need, how to patch a roof, how to scythe grain without wasting effort, how to stay silent when the reeve is nearby. These are not lessons you enjoy passing on, but they are necessary, and so you teach. You dance a little, you sing poorly, and you drink until your legs feel loose and your worries blur. Just a plain wooden board, carried by hand to the churchyard. You help dig the grave if you're strong enough. The priest says a few words in Latin. No one understands them, but they bow their heads anyway. Later, the spot is marked with a stone or not at all. You remember by proximity. That one was buried near the fence. This one by the old tree. Eventually, even that memory fades. Then, the next morning, you wake to the same cracked floor and the same weak broth. Celebration doesn't change your station. But for one evening, it lets you pretend. The walls sweat with moisture. The roof leaks in 3 places. If a pig dies, it might be days before you can bury it, and the smell creeps through the walls like a living thing. If someone falls sick, the hut becomes a chamber of wheezing and prayers. You know not to breathe too close. Illness moves quickly in these close quarters. You've seen whole families disappear in a matter of weeks. The priest says it's God's judgment, but in your heart, you think it's just bad air and too many bodies in too small a space. You huddle together in the dark, listening to the drumming above and praying that the wind doesn't lift the thatch clear off. In those hours, you tell stories again. Not just the frightening ones. But most are not built with care. They go where the land allows. That means many homes sit close to the pigs, close to the cesspit, close to the runoff that trails down from the Lord's barn. You know not to drink from the wrong place. But sometimes you forget, or the children do. Then the fevers come. And when they do, you place damp cloth on the forehead and whisper old prayers under your breath. Some survive. Some don't. Sometimes old tales from your grandparents about wolves that talked or kings who gave away gold to the poor. No one believes them, but they pass the time. The air smells of damp wool and old smoke. You rise carefully, joints stiff from the chill, and reach for a crust of bread left near the hearth. It's hard as stone, and you break it with the edge of your knife, chewing slowly, teeth grinding against the grit that always seems to find its way into the flour. In winter, it is a mercy. In summer, it is suffocating. You sometimes wish for more space, but if the hut were larger, it would be colder. And if it were warmer, you might be tempted to dream. Even your dreams must make room for others. The children toss beside you, elbows jabbing in the dark, and the baby coughs with a wet rasp that sets your teeth on edge. You pull the blanket tighter. It's not enough, but it will have to be. Sleep, when it comes, is shallow. You wake often, startled by wind or hunger, or simply the ache in your back that never quite leaves. In the morning, you wake not to sunlight, but to movement. The hut is both shelter and prison. In bad weather, it becomes your world. During festivals, the hut fills with sound. For most of the year, your home smells of wood smoke and boiled barley. But there are other days when the stench is worse. There are no luxuries here. No tapestries, no fine fabrics, no glass windows. If you're lucky, your hut stands on higher ground, away from the marsh. The walls are patched with clay, mixed by your own hands. You try not to think too hard about the future. When someone in the village dies, the huts echo with quiet grief. There is no funeral feast, no procession. Sometimes, on clear nights, you step outside and look up. This is your world, not because you chose it, but because it is what you were born into. Chapter 3. The Uprising of the Peasants. It begins, as so many things do, not with shouting or steel, but with a whisper. One man muttering beneath his breath as he bends to harvest flax. Another agreeing in a voice too low for the reeve to hear. A woman shakes her head as she watches her child gnaw on a piece of bark, then murmurs something about the Lord's granary sitting full. These are not cries for war. They are seeds of something older and quieter. Dissatisfaction, watered by hunger, buried deep under layers of obedience and fear. Life has always been hard. But lately it has begun to feel unbearable. The grain yield last harvest was poor, yet the tax was not reduced. The priest said the tithe must still be paid. The reeve said the field must still be plowed. And the Lord, when he rode past in his fur-lined cloak, said nothing at all. He looked ahead, through you, as if your labor were a fog he had to ride through. Not something he needed to understand. And then it happened, a small thing at first. A young man named Gerwald was caught trapping rabbits in the woods just beyond the manor's edge. It was land claimed by the Lord. All game belonged to him by decree. Gerwald was hungry. His sister was ill. But none of that mattered. The punishment came swiftly. They tied him to the stocks, stripped his tunic from his back, and lashed him until the blood soaked into the snow. The children watched from a distance. So did the priest. The reeve wiped the whip clean and went back to counting sacks of barley. That night, no one spoke of what happened. But the air in the village had changed. The men sat closer around the fire. The women were quieter than usual, their eyes distant. Something had cracked. Not broken fully, but split just enough to let in a gust of dangerous thought. What if they said no? What if they refused to work the next day? What if they gathered, not as neighbors, but as one body? You listen in silence as the ideas unfold in the hush of candlelight. The oldest men shake their heads. They remember other times, other beatings, other failures. They say it will come to nothing. But others, younger and angrier, begin to speak more clearly. Not of open revolt. That would be suicide, but of defiance. A refusal to carry out the Lord as newest demand, hauling timber from the forest to build an addition on the manor hall. It is labor outside your usual dues. It was not agreed upon. It feels wrong. The next morning, 3 men do not show up for work. They stay in their huts, doors bolted, families gathered close. The reeve notices. He marks their names. When he returns the next day with a pair of mounted guards, 1 man is gone, vanished in the night. Another is dragged out and beaten in front of his wife. The third, an older man with a crooked spine, is forced to the manor to explain himself. He does not return. You begin to feel the weight of something real taking shape. A slow, simmering rage that seeps into your bones, not just yours. Everyone's. The fields feel colder, the reeve's presence more sinister. The priest's sermons about humility and patience begin to ring hollow. What does he know of hunger? His belly is round. His hands are soft. He drinks wine while you gnaw on roots. Another week passes. Then someone leaves a sign carved into the door of a tithe barn. It's crude, barely legible. Just a pair of crossed lines, the mark of a man who cannot write but still wishes to speak. You know what it means. Refusal. Resistance. The message spreads in murmurs, never spoken aloud when strangers are near. The reeve walks faster now, eyes sharp. The steward visits more frequently. The Lord has not come himself, but you hear rumors. He is gathering more men. Preparing for something. Perhaps he senses what is building, even from his seat in the high hall. At night, there is talk of how it might be done. How the granary might be raided. How the steward might be trapped along the forest path. These plans are clumsy. Desperate, you do not know tactics. You know only the feel of a hoe in your hand, the ache in your back, and the quiet certainty that things cannot continue like this. It's not ambition that drives you. It's survival. Rebellion is not a noble cause here. It is a final option. One night, a group gathers in secret near the old well, where the sound of flowing water hides your voices. You light no torches. You keep your faces low. There's no leader, only shared misery. You speak of justice, of fairness, of the right to feed your children from the earth you till. Someone brings out a club. Another, a sickle, sharpened not for crops, but for something else. You do not cheer. You only nod. But not everyone in the village agrees. There are those who fear the punishment more than the suffering. They whisper to the reeve. They report what they hear. And the next day, soldiers arrive. Not many, just enough. Their armor clinks softly as they ride into the center of the village, eyes hard. The priest stands with them, his hands raised, voice trembling as he urges peace. But peace was broken long ago. And now, the weight of defiance hangs in the cold air like mist. You do not know what will happen next. The soldiers say nothing. The reeve wears a look of grim satisfaction. And you, along with the others, wait to see if the earth will finally shake. The soldiers do not strike immediately. They wait. This is how fear works best. Not through noise and violence, but through silence, through the long ache of uncertainty. Yours, not shouted, but delivered like a verdict. You step outside. The frost crunches under your feet. A soldier waits. He gestures, and you follow, knowing there's no choice. You are brought not to the manor, but to the church. Inside, the priest stands waiting, eyes heavy. The others are waiting for you, gathered at a distance. You shake your head once, slowly. It is enough. The rebellion dies in that moment. One leaves the village soon after, vanishing into the night. His wife claims he died of fever, but no one believes her. Another drinks himself into a stupor and is found drowned in the marsh a week later. When the grain shipment is heavier than expected, someone whispers a curse, less upright. It's not humility, it's caution. You speak less, you listen more. You trust no one, no goodbye. His mother cries for 3 days, then stops. She does not speak of him again? The priest thanks God for his mercy. You thank the rain and the sun and the stubborn seeds that refuse to die. You tend the soil with practiced hands. You avoid the forest. You speak only when needed. And every night before sleep you press the lock of hair they gave you into the palm of your hand. A reminder. A warning. A memory. In your heart you hope you made it to a town. In a name not spoken, a meeting never held, a future carefully folded away and hidden beneath the straw mattress. You survive. That is the victory and the price. That he found work, found freedom, found a future not shaped by frozen soil and shackles. But hope is a risky thing, and you do not say it aloud. Even your own kin seem less certain. You watch what you say around the fire. Even a joke, if heard in the wrong tone, could become a weapon. The line between survival and danger has grown thin. When the reeve son falls ill, a neighbor does not grieve. When the Lord's dog drowns in the stream, a boy is seen smiling. Nothing direct, nothing treasonous. Just the quiet erosion of loyalty. The third stops speaking altogether. He sits by the fire each night, sharpening a blade he never uses. You wonder if it's meant for himself, not in blood, but in resignation. There's no glorious fight, no banner raised, and with it comes a terrible normalcy. The manor is repaired with fresh timber. The fields are replanted. Taxes are paid. Children are born. No one talks about the uprising, not because they've forgotten, but because remembering it out loud feels dangerous, as though the memory itself might invite punishment. The well remains unused and overgrown. A few times you walk past it, you pause. You wonder what would have happened if you had acted sooner, or later, or not at all. Just the quiet collapse of hope under the weight of survival. He does not need to. His authority has been affirmed without a sword lifted. That is the brilliance of fear. It does not need spectacle, just pressure, just presence. The priest resumes his sermons, heavier with warnings now. He speaks of obedience with more urgency. He speaks of punishment with more poetry. You wonder if he, too, feels the weight of guilt. Everyone returns to their tasks. The stew is stirred. The fields are tended. The dead silence returns. He does not look surprised to see you. You wonder if he knew. If someone whispered in his ear during confession or over a shared cup of wine. For 2 full days, they stay in the village, walking slowly past doors, examining the fields, speaking quietly with the reeve. Their presence is like a fog. You can't escape it. Even behind closed shutters, even in the warmth of the hearth, their armor clinks in your memory. Their faces haunt your dreams. The children fall quiet. The laughter disappears. Even the livestock seem to move more cautiously, sensing a shift in the air. On the 3rd morning, a name is spoken aloud. The reeve arrives a moment later, along with 2 other villagers, men you once trusted. One keeps his eyes low. The other looks straight at you. His mouth is tight, his jaw firm. Instead, he cuts a lock of your hair with a knife and presses it into your hand. It is not a punishment. A mark. You're being watched. If you are seen near the old well again, if you speak too boldly, if another symbol is carved into a door, you will not be summoned to the church. You will be taken to the forest, and you will not return. A betrayer's face. No accusation is made. No defense is offered. The priest speaks of obedience, of God's order, of how the land must be kept in peace or all shall suffer. Then he steps back. The soldier does not strike. You leave heart pounding, sweat cold beneath your tunic. The men who whispered of rising never speak of it again. Time moves forward. It always does. The Lord never mentions it, but the resentment doesn't vanish. It just burrows deeper. A slow, smoldering heat beneath the cold exterior of routine. You begin to carry yourself differently, slower. One day, the boy who once carved the mark on the tithe barn disappears. No warning. The fields are greener come spring. A good harvest is expected. The reeve is in better spirits. He even jokes once, though no one laughs. Rebellion, it turns out, does not always end in flames. Sometimes it ends in silence. In empty glances and untold stories. Chapter 4. The tithe barn and the toll of the church. The church bell doesn't chime often. Not like it does in towns where the rhythm of life is ruled by its tolls. In your village, it rings for birth, for death, and for Sundays. Occasionally for holy days when fasting is required or when saints must be remembered with song. But more often, it tolls for duty. And when it rings just past sunrise on a day that should have been for fieldwork, you know exactly why. The tithe is due. You rise slowly, not out of laziness, but calculation. The longer you wait, the longer the line will be. If you show up too early, you may be asked to help unload. But wait too long, and the priest will notice. There's always a balance in these things. You step out into a gray morning, your sack already prepared. 1/10 of what you grew last season. Barley, mostly. Some beans. A few wrinkled onions wrapped in cloth. The best of what you had. Not because you're generous, but because if you bring less than what's expected, the priest will notice. And that notice carries consequences. The tithe barn stands just beyond the church itself. A large timber structure with thick walls and a sloped roof that gathers moss in the spring. Its doors are massive, held shut with a wooden beam thicker than your thigh. Today, they are thrown open, revealing the dark interior lined with sacks, crates, and baskets. Inside, the steward and a pair of monks record each offering. They wear robes of coarse brown wool, tied at the waist with simple cords. Their expressions are blank, practiced. They do not smile. They do not frown. They simply measure, record, and nod. You stand in the line, shifting your weight from foot to foot, the sack heavy on your shoulder. Around you are others, neighbors, kin, rivals, all quiet. No one complains. Not out loud. The church is watching. Its stone walls feel colder than usual, as if the building itself disapproves of your thoughts. You look up at the small stained glass window above the door. A painted lamb stares back at you, eyes wide, innocent. It has seen everything. When it's your turn, you step forward, bow your head, and lay the sack on the table. A monk opens it, sifts through the contents, then lifts a single onion and holds it to the light. He says nothing, but the pause is long. Then he nods and records a mark on the parchment. You exhale. Not relief, just release. Another obligation met. Another day survived. Behind the barn, other men load the goods onto carts. Some will be kept here for the priest. Others sent to the abbey 2 valleys over. Some may even end up at the bishop's table. You don't know where it all goes, only that it leaves. You watch a cart being loaded with fresh grain while your wife serves broth thinned with water back home. It is not a good feeling. The church says the tithe is God's share, that by giving it freely you honor the divine order and earn grace. But grace does not patch a leaking roof or feed a hungry child. Grace does not stop a fever. You have prayed more than once until your knees ached and your voice broke. But still the child died. Still, the grain molded. Still, the Lord's steward demanded more. You believe in God. You must. But you have doubts about his messengers. After the tithe is delivered, there is a sermon. Everyone must attend. The church is dark inside, lit only by 2 narrow windows and the flickering light of fat candles. The air smells of wax and damp stone. You sit on a wooden bench, hands clasped, back stiff. The priest speaks in Latin at first, then switches to the local tongue, reminding you all of your place in God's world. You are stewards of the soil, sheep in the pasture, clay in the potter's hands. You must give what you can so that the holy work may continue. You must not grumble. You must not doubt. Those who do will be judged. You nod as do the others. But inside your thoughts drift. You wonder how much barley is needed to reach heaven. You wonder if the saints ever went hungry, if they knew the taste of spoiled cabbage or the ache of frostbitten toes. You not ask these questions aloud. That, too, would be judged. The priest is a man of contradiction. His robe is patched but clean. His shoes are leather, though scuffed. His hands are soft. He speaks of suffering as if it is noble. He speaks of charity, though he owns more than anyone in the village. He keeps a cellar with wine, a library with books none of you can read, and a chamber warmed by a private hearth. You know, because you help build it, lifting stone and mixing mortar under the weight of his supervision. Yet, he is not cruel. He blesses the sick. He visits the dying. He speaks kindly to children and buries the dead with care. You do not hate him, but you do not trust him either. He belongs to another world, a world of scripture and silver chalices and whispered absolutions behind closed doors. Your world is of mud, hunger, and duty. He kneels in prayer. You kneel in submission. Both forms look the same from a distance. After the sermon, there's bread. Blessed and broken, passed from hand to hand. It is dry and tastes of ash, but you eat it with reverence. The priest calls it the body of Christ. You call it your first meal of the day. Outside, the village is quiet again. The carts are gone. The barn is closed. You return home with an empty sack and a mind full of questions. The tithe is over, but the toll lingers. Not just in your stomach, but in your soul. The tithe is not the only debt you owe to the church. It is simply the most visible. The truth is, every hour of your life is lived beneath its gaze. Not a day passes without some reminder of your station in the eyes of heaven. The seasons are wrapped in rituals, your calendar dotted not with holidays, but with holy days. Feast days, fast days, saints' days, days for penance, and days for silence. And while the priest's Latin may blur together like smoke in your ears, the expectations are always made clear. Sunday is not a day of rest for you, not really. You may not labor in the field, not openly, but there is still wood to gather, animals to feed, water to carry, and tools to mend. The priest says work on the Sabbath is a sin, but when your goat is limping or your roof sags with wet straw, the line between labor and necessity becomes a blurred smudge. Still, you make the effort. You walk to the church, you bow your head. You listen as the priest reminds you that your suffering is sacred and your place in this world is proof of God's plan. They say those who endure faithfully will be rewarded in the next life. But that life feels distant, and your current one grows heavier each season. Children are baptized within days of birth, not because the ceremony is beautiful, but because death comes swiftly in Saxony. To leave a child unbaptized is to risk their soul. And so even in the chill of a January morning, the mother is helped to the church, bleeding and pale, carrying the bundle of cloth that may not live to see the spring. The priest speaks the words, The baby wails. The family breathes a little easier, not with relief, just with permission to hope. Marriage, too, is not truly yours to choose. It must be approved. The church must witness it. A serf cannot wed outside his village without permission from both the Lord and the priest. Love, if it exists, is secondary to arrangement. You married when your father said it was time. She did the same. You met first at the well, spoke briefly by the oven, then stood together before the altar while the priest tied your hands with a cord and declared you one. Death is the only certainty, and even that carries a fee. Burial ground near the church is reserved for those who die in grace. If your tithes are unpaid, if your confessions go unsaid, if suspicion clings to your name, your body might be laid beyond the wall. Your soul, they say, will wander, cold, alone, and so you confess often, even when you have nothing to confess. You kneel before the priest and whisper your smallest sins, a lie told. A tool borrowed too long, a moment of anger when the Lord's steward struck your brother and you did nothing. The priest listens, he absolves, you rise. Nothing is different, but at least the ritual is complete. Sometimes the priest visits your home. He steps across the threshold and blesses the hearth. You do not know what he sees when he looks around. The cracked walls, the thin soup, the children too quiet for their age. He prays over the sick, draws holy water across their brow, and speaks of mercy. If the illness passes, he credits God. If it doesn't, he speaks of mystery. Either way, the outcome belongs to the divine, never to you. And yet, despite all this, you still believe, or you try to, not because you're gullible, but because belief gives shape to the chaos. It helps explain why the Lord is rich and you are not. Why some fields grow and others flood. Why your neighbor's child survived the fever and yours did not. The church gives you the language to wrap around pain, even if it cannot remove it. In a world where so little can be controlled, even a small illusion of purpose feels like shelter. The structure of belief is etched into your habits. Before eating, you cross yourself. Before sleep, you murmur a prayer. During thunderstorms, you hold a charm shaped like a cross, convinced it will turn the lightning aside. The priest scolds such superstitions, but you clutch it anyway. Your grandmother wore it, so did her mother. You'll pass it to your daughter one day, along with your fears. Holy relics are spoken of with reverence, a piece of cloth said to be from a saint's robe, a splinter of wood claimed to be from the true cross. The priest keeps one in a locked case behind the altar. He unveils it only during Lent. You've never touched it. If you have. But you've seen it glimmering faintly by candlelight. And though a part of you wonders if it's truly what he says it is, another part of you does not dare doubt. Faith isn't about proof. It's about not needing it. The church hosts feast days, celebrations of saints whose names you barely remember. On those days, there's music, food, and a rare moment of joy. The priest leads the procession. Children carry candles. A carved figure of the Virgin is paraded through the village, its robes embroidered with borrowed silver thread. And you walk behind, eyes lowered, heart open. For a few hours, it feels like the weight is shared. That you are part of something larger than your hut and your hunger. Then the candles are snuffed. The figure returned to the chapel, and the normal world slides back into place like a lid on a pot. But the church does not only take. Sometimes, in moments of true desperation, it gives. When your brother was arrested for stealing a sack of oats from the Lord's barn, it was the priest who pleaded for mercy. When the floods came and the grain stores rotted, it was the church that opened its cellar and handed out meager portions. Not enough to survive, but enough to remember. Enough to make you hesitate before questioning too loudly. It's a strange balance. Reverence and resentment. Hope and hunger. The priest speaks of heaven, but your eyes are always on the earth. The church tells you that suffering is temporary, but it feels eternal. And though you sometimes curse under your breath, you still kneel. You still cross yourself when the bells toll. You still lower your head when the procession passes. Not because you are weak, but because you have nothing else. In Saxony, your soul belongs to the church. Just as your hands belong to the field and your body to the Lord. You are divided in three. Each piece claimed, each piece taxed, each piece blessed. You bear it because you must. Because to resist is to lose not just your life, but your meaning. The church teaches you how to endure without asking why. And so, on the day after the tithe, when your larder is a little emptier and your heart a little heavier, you light a candle before the altar. You offer a prayer, not for abundance, just for the strength to return to the field tomorrow and the faith to believe it matters.
Chapter 5. Cold Hands and Colder Justice. Saxon law and punishment justice in your world does not wear a blindfold, wears a chainmail shirt, and rides a horse. It arrives in the form of a steward with a scroll tucked under his arm, or a reeve with a jaw clenched too tight, or a stranger from the Lord's court who speaks a dialect none of you fully understand. Slow, cold, and final. There is no trial in the way modern ears might expect. There is no presumption of innocence. If an accusation is made, it clings to you like smoke. Even if you are cleared later, you are still remembered as the one who was suspected. That memory follows you longer than the punishment itself. There is no joy in justice here, only silence, only endurance. There are cases that gnaw at the edges of your mind. A boy who took a pair of eggs from the manor kitchen to feed his sister and was found hanging from a tree 3 days later. A woman accused of sorcery because a neighbor's cow fell ill and who vanished before the judgment could be passed. But God in these moments feels very far away. A man whose sheep went missing, then reappeared 2 weeks later, but not before he lost a finger for the crime. It is his badge of authority. He rarely uses it as a weapon, but its presence is a reminder. The oldest men in the village gather, listen, then speak their decision. These are the only moments when justice feels human, when it sounds like a conversation, not a decree. But even then, the shadow of the manor looms large, teaches you how to walk, how to speak, how to disappear into the rhythm of your duties. It teaches you what happens when you step outside the pattern, and it never lets you forget. If the Lord or the priest takes an interest, their word overrides all else. He can call an assembly. He can request soldiers. He can deliver a punishment on the Lord's behalf. Some reeves wield this power carefully, others do not. The law does not need to catch you in the act. It needs only to suspect. The steward says that order is sacred, that rebellion is sin, discipline protects the weak. But you wonder who those weak ones are. You look around at the thin faces and the bent backs, and you realize it's not you the law protects. It's not your justice being enforced. Justice for the peasant in Saxony is not an abstract concept. It is a weight, a presence. Not a court, but a public gathering. The villagers cluster together near the edge of the field, near the post where lashings take place and where judgments are read aloud. He had complained that the priest drank too much wine. A small thing, a private thing, but someone overheard. The man was tied to a post and forced to apologize publicly, not just to the priest, but to God. You remember his voice cracking as he spoke, his eyes not meeting anyone else's. He moved away a few months later. No one asked where he went. They live in the pauses between conversations, in the way people glance at each other when something goes missing. Justice here is not about right and wrong. It is about order, stability, the appearance of peace. But most punishments are short and sharp. They do not reform, they remind. A scar across the cheek, a missing toe, a limp that never quite fades. These are the marks of law. They say, more clearly than any sermon, that obedience is not a suggestion. It's the sacrifice of a few to maintain that illusion. Sometimes the Lord sends his steward. Sometimes he sends no one, leaving it to the reeve and the priest to decide. A hot iron is placed in your hand, and you are told to walk 3 paces with it. Your wounds are bound, and 3 days later, the priest unwraps them. If they are healing cleanly, God has found you innocent. If they fester, you are guilty. It is not the iron that terrifies you. It is the uncertainty. The knowledge that your life might hinge not on justice, but on infection. And once a decision is made, there is no appeal. A sentence already half spoken by the time you hear your name called. You grow up knowing the rules, though no one teaches them in any formal way. They are passed through glances, warnings, and the hushed stories told beside the hearth. Never steal from the Lord's storehouse. Never hunt in his forest. Never speak against the priest. Never leave the manor without written permission. And never take more than your portion at the mill. And above all, never forget your place. A night in the stocks, where your legs cramp and your head sags, until the sunrise peels your eyelids open. Whipping with a knotted cord, each strike a lesson taught in the language of pain. Branding for thieves, mutilation for repeat offenses. And death by rope, by drowning, or by blade, for those considered a threat to the manor's peace. The law does not operate on forgiveness. It moves with the certainty of winter. When a crime is committed or when someone believes it has been there as an assembly, the punishments are not elaborate. They are meant to be memorable. No one cheers at these punishments. Not really. Even the ones who whisper that the accused deserved it avert their eyes when the lash is drawn back. But it isn't always so simple. These stories are not told often. They're not forgotten either. There is also the ordeal, a ceremony of sorts, reserved for cases where the truth cannot be known. The priest oversees these ordeals. He speaks the words, sprinkles the holy water, and steps aside. He claims he does not judge. Only God does. There is no prison in your village, no long-term punishment. If someone is too dangerous to live among you, they are removed. Permanently. The reeve carries a staff carved with notches and symbols. When disputes arise between peasants over land, over livestock, over the boundaries of a garden plot, they are settled by arbitration. As a child, you saw a man punished for speaking too freely. You learn early not to speak carelessly, not to question too loudly. The cold in Saxony cuts to the bone, but the justice cuts deeper.
You see the gallows long before you ever stand beneath them. They rise just beyond the churchyard, tall and still, framed by the low hills and the sharp sky. One death, seen by all, can last a generation in the mind, and they are public, always public. When someone is condemned, the villagers are required to attend. Children, too, unless very small. The Lord believes justice must be visible to be believed. You do not argue. You stand among the crowd, silent, eyes down, about how long people can remember what you did or what they think you did. Now, he barely speaks. His hut is crooked. His eyes are yellow with age. But the children say he still remembers every name he ever wrote down. The priest sits behind the screen, his breath scented with wine, his hands folded neatly in his lap. But in Saxony, you are judged long before that, where guilt requires proof and truth can be spoken without shaking. You see their faces? Not just their pain, but their silence, their shock. How quickly they became examples. You know how thin the line is. You know how little it takes. But that world is far from you. You may never see it. And so you move through this one carefully, eyes open, mouth shut, judged by those who hold the records, by those who wear rings and robes and ride horses with brass bridles, judged by men whose homes have dry floors and warm beds. Justice here does not lift the low. It keeps them in place. You speak and he listens. You admit small things, a stolen turnip, a night of drinking, a curse muttered under your breath. He tells you what to do, how many prayers, how many days of fasting. Then you leave, lighter, but watched. If you do not return on the day he expects, he sends someone just to ask, just to remind. Every crime, every punishment, every lash he ordered. When he walks into the square, people move aside. He carries no staff now, but he still commands silence. You wonder if he sleeps, if he sees faces in the dark, if he regrets anything at all. A man who once disputed a tax, even politely, finds himself inspected more closely during every tithe. A woman who questioned the priest's sermon is left out of the next feast day procession. These are not official punishments. They do not leave bruises, but they mark you all the same, like being weighed down by stones only you can feel. The man who will die is usually shackled, dirty, and near collapse from the beatings given before the final walk. He confesses loudly, coached by the priest. He pleads for forgiveness. Sometimes he weeps. Sometimes he doesn't. You know, men who've stolen tools and been let go, and men who've spoken carelessly and vanished. You know, women accused of adultery who were forced to shave their heads while their partners were never named. You know a boy who was beaten for breaking a fence, though everyone knew it had rotted weeks before. But none of this surprises you. It just teaches you how to survive. Stay quiet. Stay busy. Stay useful. Blend in with the pattern of daily life and do not attract attention. No one ever points them out. They don't need to. The wood darkens over time, stained by rain and memory. It is not often used, but always maintained. If a woman is said to curse the cows of her neighbors, she is visited by the priest. Outsiders can upset the balance. They bring stories from other places, sometimes even other risings. You have heard of villages in the south where serfs refused to give labor, where barns were burned, where a lord's steward vanished and was never found. These tales are told in whispers, like ghost stories. Part warning, part wishful thinking, they do not last long. The priest hears about them and gives a sermon on obedience. The reeve walks the village more often. The stories fade. If a man drinks too much and strikes his wife, he may be punished or ignored, depending on who he is and how much grain he pays each season. There's no clear code, no written laws for you to study or understand. Just customs, just the will of the powerful. And in that gray space, anything can happen. A silent warning. A quiet shape in the landscape that reminds everyone what happens when the order breaks. Executions are rare. Not because mercy rules, but because fear is more efficient when stretched thin. You have seen 2 hangings? One for theft, one for murder. Neither made you feel safer. Just colder. Justice also moves through rumor. If the Lord suspects a family of harboring a runaway, they are watched. When a stranger enters the village, a traveler, a merchant, a messenger, they are watched carefully. Justice is not just about punishment. It is about memory. There is an old man who lives at the edge of the village. Once he was a reeve. There is no such thing as fairness here. Not in a sense of balance. Confession is meant to cleanse the soul, but even that feels like another kind of control. The church says God will judge you after death. Somewhere in your mind, you wonder what it would be like to live where justice means fairness. Where wrongs are corrected, not feared. On rare nights, you lie awake and think of those who stood before the post. And you promise yourself you will never cross it. 5 complete. Chapter 6. A day in the life of a Saxon reeve before the sun has even crested the edge of the woods. Before the roosters find their voice and the smoke begins to curl out of cottage chimneys, the reeve is already awake. He does not live in a manor. He is not a noble. He sleeps under a thatched roof like everyone else, eats from a wooden bowl, and walks through the same muddy lanes. But his boots are newer, his coat is thicker, and when he steps into the morning fog, people notice. The reeve is chosen from among the villagers, elected, in theory, but only from a narrow list of men the Lord considers dependable. And once appointed, he serves the manor, not the people. It is a lonely station. You are not one of the lords, but you are no longer truly one of the serfs either. You still work, still till a patch of land, still owe the same duties. But you also carry a staff marked with the Lord's insignia, and that changes everything. Today, the reeve begins with numbers. In a leather pouch by his side, he carries a roll of parchment and a stub of charcoal. Grain tallies. Labor owed. Names. He walks from hut to hut, knocking lightly on door frames, not to greet, but to check. Who is sick? Who is late? Who has fled? He makes no threats. He doesn't need to. His presence alone is enough to reset the pace of the village. A man stirs from sleep faster when he hears the reeve's footsteps. A woman hurries her child out the door when she sees his shadow. He moves methodically. Today, he will inspect the west fields. The barley should be sprouting, but there were signs of mold after last week's rain. If a man's plot fails, he'll be asked why. If his tools are broken, he may be fined. If he is seen resting too long, he may be assigned extra work. But the reeve is not cruel, not always. He knows the soil. He knows what it means to push a plow through wet clay. He knows the sound of a child crying from hunger. He carries his duty not like a sword, but like a burden. And sometimes that burden sits heavy on his shoulders. Midday finds him at the tithe barn. He reviews the store, counts the sacks, records the weight. He notices that one is lighter than it should be. He marks it. He says nothing for now. Later, when the priest has gone back inside, he'll speak with the man responsible. Perhaps it was a mistake. Perhaps it was theft. Perhaps it was desperation. The Reeve does not care for motives. He cares for order. Because if order slips, if the numbers no longer match, if the village loses its rhythm, the Lord will send someone worse. He doesn't fear the serfs. Not truly. Most avoid him. Some mutter when his back is turned, but they do not challenge him. Not unless they're ready to face the consequences. He has been punched once. Years ago. A drunkard, angry about an ox being taken for tax. The Reeve did not strike back. He let the man finish, then summoned the steward. The man lost his hut that winter. He froze before the snow melted. Since then, no one has touched him. Yet there is a cost. The Reeve's wife does not speak at the well anymore. The other women turn away when she arrives. His children are excluded from games. When they fall ill, the midwife comes slowly. When they recover, no one brings broth. This is the price of the staff he carries. Authority buys safety, but it sells friendship. In the late afternoon, the Reeve meets with the blacksmith to inspect tools. The scythes for the harvest, the blades for the Lord's men. He checks them carefully. Not for quality, he trusts the smith's hand, but for numbers. If one is missing, it must be explained. If one is damaged, it must be replaced. Every item accounted for. Every item marked. He signs his name with a scratch and a symbol he cannot read. But he remembers, and his memory is enough. The sky darkens early. A storm is gathering. The Reeve makes one final stop in Elder's hut, where a complaint was lodged about boundary stones being moved. He examines the field. The marks are faint. The stone sunk in mud. It could be a mistake. It could be mischief. He nods slowly. Ben instructs both families to come to the meeting tree in the morning. There, they will speak before witnesses. There, he will decide. Before returning home, he walks the boundary of the village. A habit, a ritual. He checks the fences, the watch posts, the shallow ditch meant to keep animals out and thieves in. He sees footprints in the mud small, hurried, leading toward the woods. Not a grown man. A boy, perhaps. A runner. He kneels, touches the tracks, then stands again. He will report it to the priest in the morning. Not as an accusation, just a detail. A record. Back home, the Reeve removes his boots. His wife hands him a bowl of stew. She does not ask what happened today. She never does. He eats slowly, watching the fire. His shoulders ache. His neck feels stiff. He rubs the back of his hand against his cheek. It is rough, unshaven. But there's no time for vanity, only for precision. Later, he writes on the parchment again. A family with a sick child. A fence that needs mending. A woman who may be hiding grain. None of this is certain, but he records it. Not because he enjoys it, because if he doesn't, someone else will. Someone less kind. In the flickering light of the hearth, the Reeve sets down his staff. Not with ceremony, not with relief, but with the quiet weight of repetition. The staff is carved from ash wood, smooth in the middle from years of handling. Because even when the Reeve sleeps, he dreams with a ledger in his mind. Faces, debts, fines owed, offenses remembered. Years ago, he was a miller's apprentice, quick with numbers, trusted by the old Reeve. That's how it started. Sometimes he writes down that a sick child helped in the fields, though she never left her bed. The Reeve does not starve, but he does not rest. He steps out into the pale light and breathes in the fog. And before he speaks a word, before he knocks on the first door or counts the first sack, he reminds himself of two things. One, if he does not do this work, someone worse will. Two, no one will ever thank him. He does not kneel before the steward, but he bows to the weight of every decision. He does not weep at funerals, but he digs more graves than most. To remind himself what it's like to be unobserved. A cry in the night that must be followed by a question. Who and why? Among trees and moss and the sharp scent of pine, he allows himself to be just a man, not a name on a parchment. Not a hand that writes. Just a pair of boots pressing into the damp earth, unnoticed. But these kindnesses are rationed. Too many, and he will be replaced. It means the priest nods when they pass each other on the path. But it also means he is the first name spoken in anger, the first face blamed when punishment falls. He is not the cause. But he is the closest. He knows what kind of man would take his place. She says nothing, just leaves the bundle by his door. He knows it is a gesture of respect, or fear, maybe both. He never acknowledges it. If he did, others would talk. They would wonder if he favors her family, and that wonder could cost her. So he pretends not to see. Even kindness in his position can be a weapon. The demand to the doing? If he disappears, the fields do not halt, but they become more dangerous. If he makes a mistake, the punishment does not fall on him. It falls on the village. The kind who enjoys the whip. The kind who needs no reason to punish. The tithe count was short. The steward arrived with 10 soldiers. They stood in the village square for 3 days. No one spoke, no one smiled. At night, their laughter echoed from the manor like wolves circling a camp. A young boy was accused of hiding grain in his hut. The reeve knew it wasn't true, but he also knew what would happen if he said so. So he said nothing, and the boy's family was exiled. The hut was burned. No one speaks of it now, but the reeve remembers. He always will. The kind who will not walk the village boundaries at dusk, or remember whose husband died last winter and cannot sow enough. Barley on her own. A temporary appointment, they said, just for one season. But the season became a year, and the year became a decade. Now, no one remembers him as anything else. When his name is spoken, it's not with affection. It's with calculation. Who does he favor? Who does he watch? Who has earned his silence? He has forgotten the names of boys he once played with. But he remembers which men still owe 3 days of plowing from the spring rains, and which women did not attend Mass last Candlemas. Memory is not just a skill. It's a defense. It bears the faint crest of the local lord scratched, not stamped, because it was made not by artisans, but by villagers. Like everything in the reeve's life, it is simple and functional. Like him, it has seen too much. The children are already asleep. His wife mends a torn sleeve beside the fire. She does not ask what names he wrote today. She does not ask what punishments he witnessed. Their conversation has narrowed over time, not out of cruelty, but survival. Too many words, too many thoughts, and you begin to feel again. And feeling in his position is dangerous. He lies back on his straw bed and closes his eyes. But rest comes late and never fully. He has not always been the reeve. He is not without kindness. Sometimes he overlooks small thefts. There is a cruel truth in Saxony. Power does not lift you above suffering. It simply changes how you experience it. Each morning he wakes before the others, sometimes before the birds, because the reeve is a bridge no one loves. He connects the matter to the mud, the law to the life. He remembers the winter 2 years ago when the Lord's ledger came back with errors. His authority means he eats when others go hungry. It means his roof is mended first. There's a girl who brings him firewood sometimes, the daughter of a widow. Sometimes he visits the woods alone. Not to gather wood or catch game, he has no need but to feel silence. But the forest cannot keep him. The village always calls him back. There is always a dispute, a missing sheep, a crumbled fence. He does not expect forgiveness. He does not seek absolution. He simply moves forward, one mark, one name, one tally at a time. Because in Saxony, the reeve does not live to be liked. He lives to keep the peace. And sometimes peace is just the absence of rebellion. Chapter 7. The Lost Relic of St. Boniface. The story begins, as many do in Saxony, around a fire. A cold evening, the wind humming low through the cracks in the wall, the smell of boiled onions hanging heavy in the air. A man speaks softly, just above a whisper, his voice scratchy from years of dust and smoke. He speaks not of kings or saints, but of something buried. A relic. A fragment of St. Boniface's staff, lost somewhere beyond the hills, hidden in an old chapel that no longer stands. He says his grandfather saw it once. He says it glowed. No one laughs. Not because they believe him. Not fully. But because belief is not always about facts. Sometimes it's out needing something to be true. And in Saxony, Truth is often whatever gives you strength to rise again the next day. You've heard the name Boniface before. The apostle of the Germans, the priest says, a man who felled sacred trees, converted pagans, built churches where stone had never touched the ground. His relics are said to bring protection, healing, luck. The kind of luck that makes a child survive the winter or a cow-birth twins. The kind of miracle that feels small to lords, but enormous to people like you. The next day, the story lingers. You think of the hills beyond the edge of the forest. Do you go there? It's boggy and strange, dotted with the crumbled bones of old stone walls and tangled roots that twist like sleeping animals. But there's talk now, quiet talk. What if it's true? What if the relic is real? What if finding it could change something? By the end of the week, 4 men decide to search, not officially. They do not tell the reeve. They speak with their eyes more than their mouths. On the morning they leave, they carry nothing more than spades, cloaks, and a loaf of barley bread each. The priest is nowhere nearby. The reeve is at the mill. It feels like a sign. You don't expect them to return quickly. But when they do, 3 days later, they are covered in mud and their expressions are strange. They speak in fragments. They found a stone slab, carvings too worn to read. A chamber beneath, half collapsed. And something inside it wrapped in linen old, brittle, smelling of oil and mildew. One of them says it was just a piece of wood. Another says it hummed in his hands. The third won't say anything at all. That night, the village is tense. The relic, or whatever it is placed beneath a bench in one man's hut. They don't show it to the priest. Not yet, not until they understand what it means. They argue quietly. Should they hide it? Sell it? Offer it to the church and hope for favor? Then the girl who limps from a fall 6 winters ago touches it, and the next morning she walks with less pain. That's when everything changes. People begin to visit the hut. They touch the cloth. They whisper prayers. Some bring offerings, an egg, a small cake, a few copper coins. No one says aloud that the hut begins to feel like a chapel, a sacred place, by accident. The priest hears the rumors. He arrives 2 days later, his face pale, voice steady. He asks to see the object. They refuse. By that night, the priest sends for the reeve. The reeve sends for the steward. And the steward, when he comes, brings 2 armed men. Not because he expects a fight, but because he wants it known that the manor is watching. He listens, nods, asks questions with the soft patience of someone who already knows the answers. And then he takes it. He does not explain where he'll bring it. He says only that such objects must be kept safe, must be verified, must be honored properly. The villagers protest gently, respectfully. But it's clear this is not a conversation. It is a confiscation. The hut is searched. The bread is taken. The relic vanishes into the steward's satchel. What follows is a silence deeper than before. Not just from disappointment, but from the realization that even miracles are subject to rules. That even sacred things, if they exist, are not yours to hold. The girl's limp returns. A cow births still. The weather remains cold. Life resumes its rhythm, as if the relic was never there, but in whispers and corners, the story grows. Some say the steward sold it to a bishop in Mainz. Others say he buried it again, fearing its power. A few believe it was never holy at all, just a piece of wood wrapped in imagination. But no one forgets how it made them feel. That for a few days something different had entered their lives. Something unexplainable, something powerful. You walk past the old hut sometimes. The bench is still there. The floor still smells faintly of oil. And sometimes you wonder not if the relic was real, but if it mattered whether it was. Because in Saxony, belief itself is a form of rebellion. A quiet defiance of a world that rarely bends in your favor. And for just a moment, it felt like it had. The days following the relic's disappearance are heavy in a way that has nothing to do with weather. There's no punishment, no sermon, no public rebuke. And maybe that's what makes it worse. The absence of any explanation leaves something hanging in the air unspoken, unfinished. People still go to the fields, still bring their grain to the barn, still kneel at mass. But the mood has shifted, not in fear, but in deflation. That small spark, whatever it was, has been snuffed out, and No one wants to admit how much they had hoped it would last. The priest carries on as if nothing has happened. He avoids mentioning the relic, avoids naming Boniface directly. During one sermon, he speaks of false idols, of dangerous heresies, of misplaced trust. But his words land without weight. Everyone knows what he's doing. Everyone also knows he wasn't the one who found it. That distinction matters more than he thinks. The girl with the limp stops smiling. Her mother stops going to church. Not out of anger, just tiredness. You see them sometimes by the edge of the village, sitting together, staring into the woods where the relic was said to be found. As if still hoping to see it there, gleaming under a shaft of sunlight, waiting to be reclaimed. Then come the dreams. It starts quietly. A boy wakes in the night claiming to have seen a glowing figure near the old chapel ruins. A woman says her husband, dead for 3 winters, whispered her name in the dark and told her to keep believing. Another swears she saw footprints appear in the frost, though no one had passed by. You might laugh if it came from anywhere else. But in a place where so little ever changes, where the dead stay dead and hunger stays near, dreams begin to matter. They are not shared with the priest. They're shared with each other across garden fences, over buckets at the well, beside fires when the wind howls through the cracks. People whisper of the relic returning or of its spirit lingering. No one says it aloud, but there's a hunger in these stories. A need. It's not about miracles anymore. It's about meaning. You begin to notice small changes. A token tied with red thread placed at the base of the old bench. A carving of a cross on the inside of a hut door. A candle lit at midnight on St. Boniface's Day. Not by the priest's order, but by those who remember. It's not worship, not exactly. It's memory. Tribute to a possibility. Then, one cold evening, a boy falls sick. A bad fever. No one expects him to live. The family has no herbs, no help. But one neighbor, an older woman, goes into the woods and returns with a bundle of moss and bark. She boils it into a tea, places the steaming bowl beside the child, and mutters a prayer, not the priest's Latin, but something older. The next morning, the boy is sitting up, pale, weak, but breathing. The story spreads fast. The reeve says nothing, though he clearly knows. The priest visits, offers a blessing, then quickly leaves. He does not ask about the tea, and so the stories continue. Now the relic is not just a thing that was found. It is something that continues. It moves through people, through gestures, through whispers and old customs that no longer need approval. It doesn't matter whether that wooden fragment really came from Boniface as staff or from a rotted beam in a ruined chapel. What matters is that for one small sliver of time, people believed it could change something. That belief, fragile and brief, still echoes. A traveling peddler visits the village not long after. He speaks of a relic displayed in the abbey 2 valleys away. A sliver of wood, wrapped in silk, declared to be the staff of St. Boniface himself. You ask what it looks like. He shrugs. Just wood, he says, like any other stick. But the monks there say it heals the sick and drives out devils. People travel for days to see it. Deep down, The thought is bitter, but also strangely comforting. If it really is the same relic, it means it still exists. Still rests somewhere in the world. Still holds power, if not for you, then for someone. And if it's not, if it's just another object wrapped in linen and ceremony, passed off as holy to draw pilgrims and coin, then your relic lives only in memory. And maybe that's not a loss. Maybe it's a kind of freedom. Because in Saxony, most things are taken from you. Food, time, warmth, even your dead. But stories, those are yours. You pass them down, you change the edges. You stretch and reshape them until they carry the weight you need them to. The relic is gone. The pain remains, but so does something else. A flicker of meaning stitched into the daily suffering. A sense that, for once, something extraordinary reached your hands. Even if only for a moment. Even if you couldn't keep it. And in a world where everything is taxed and tallied and tracked, that moment might be the most sacred thing you ever hold. Chapter 8. Winter comes. Starvation season. The first snow is quiet. It always is. It falls gently in the night, a dusting over the hard-packed earth, softening the shape of the fields and masking the smell of the manure piles. The sun sets earlier each day. The light grows pale, thin, stretched across the sky like linen too worn to keep out the cold. Dried herbs hung high in the rafters. But already you know it won't be enough. It never is. Every winter you hope the summer's work was enough to carry you through. Every winter it proves, again, that it wasn't. The animals huddle together. Their coats thick, their ribs sharper than you remember. But the slow, dull ache that follows you through each day. You learn to ignore it, to chew bark or leather. That those who suffer in this life will rejoice in the next. His hands are curled inwards, his face blue and still. The reeve orders the body buried quickly. The ground is hard, so the grave is shallow. No marker, just a pile of stones to keep the animals away. Of mushrooms that grow on tree trunks deep in the woods. But you've seen what happens when people get it wrong. The vomiting, the shaking, the silence that follows. You weigh the risk every time you step into the trees. Of your memory, of your will to keep going. Sometimes you return with nothing. Sometimes you return with poison. Sometimes you just don't return. That night, the village is silent. Death in winter is not a tragedy. It's expected, but it still leaves a mark. Summer sun on your back, the scent of fresh hay, the sound of bees. You hold your children close and whisper old songs your mother once sang. Not to cheer them, just to fill the silence. You wake from those dreams cold to the bone, and it hurts more than hunger. Because it reminds you of what's gone. What may not come back. You nod, you cross yourself, you don't argue. But later, when your fingers tremble from cold and your stomach turns at the smell of boiled cabbage water, you wonder how much bread the priest still has in his cellar. To drink hot water with a sprig of something just to feel full. The children cry less, but only because they've learned there's nothing to be done. A handful of beans, a lump of lard, a rag of cloth. The reeve responds swiftly. Not because he enjoys it, but because he must. Order must be maintained, even in the face of starvation. A woman is caught stealing grain from the tithe barn. She is forced to spend a night outside the village, in the snow, tied to a post with her hands exposed. By morning, her fingers are blackened. She survives, but barely. The priest calls it justice. Others call it cruelty. You call it winter. You give them your portion sometimes, but they notice. They always notice. The thinning hair, the hollow cheeks, the slow movements. The strange look in people's eyes when they speak less and watch more. They're calculating, measuring, not just food, but strength. Whose child is weakest? Whose elder will not last? Whose livestock is most likely to disappear next? You've already slaughtered one pig. The other you're trying to save until January. You break the ice in the water bucket each morning with a stick. Wash when you must, otherwise you stay bundled. Even the animals inside the hut, hens, a goat, 2 rabbits, seem subdued, as though they too know not to waste energy. But if the baby's cough worsens or if the stew grows too thin, you may have no choice. In the morning, you open the hut door and see the world reborn in white. For a moment, it's almost beautiful. Almost, but your stomach knots, and not from awe. The snow is not a wonder. It is a warning. Winter in Saxony does not announce itself with fanfare. It arrives slowly in the aching joints, the fogged breath, the rising hunger. You've stored what you could. Turnips in a pit near the well. Barley in sacks tucked behind the hearth. The fire is your companion now. Small, smoky, reluctant. You feed it with whatever you can find. Twigs, dry moss, dung patties shaped and dried during the harvest months. Wood is precious. You ration it carefully. Nights are long, and the cold presses through walls like a persistent stranger. You sleep in shifts. Someone always keeps the fire alive. If it dies, the temperature inside the hut drops dangerously fast. The children don't play anymore. They stay close to the hearth, wrapped in wool and silence. Their cheeks are chapped. Their noses red, and then comes the hunger. Not the sharp, desperate kind that gnaws at your belly after a missed meal. The priest visits once a week. He brings no food, only prayers. He tells you to trust in God's providence. One morning, A man is found frozen near the edge of the village. He had gone to collect firewood. Some resort to theft. You know the signs. There are whispers of wild roots that can be boiled. You dream of warmth more often now, not firelight. Real warmth. And yet, you keep moving, you split wood, you stir pots. Because in Saxony, winter is not a season. It is a test of your body. By midwinter, time stretches. Days are short, but they feel endless. You lose track of them not because they go fast, but because they go nowhere. You reach for a sentence, and it slips away. Your fingers go stiff. You catch one trying to eat dirt, quietly, by the wall. You don't scold them. You remember doing the same once, just to feel something in your mouth. Your legs ache even when still. The children grow quieter. They sleep more, which worries you. The ground too hard, the bodice too fragile. Sometimes they are wrapped and kept in sheds until the earth softens. The distant look in someone's eyes that says they've gone somewhere else. The strange calm before the collapse. No one screams. No one begs. A softness to the morning frost. A drip from the eaves. You share food again, if only scraps. A crust of bread wrapped in cloth, passed from one hand to another like a sacrament. It's not generosity. It's gratitude that you're still here. That someone else is too. You do not tell the full story. You hold it close. Fold it like a cloth and place it deep inside your chest. Not to forget, but to survive next time. A test that always comes again. You learn not to hope it won't. You learn only to prepare, to plan, to remember who helped you, who didn't, what worked, what failed. The sound of birds. The first time you hear one, you stop in your tracks, not because you're brave, but because you're still here. It's just a chirp, one note, but it splits something open in your chest. The dog follows you into the pasture again. The children laugh, just once, and it startles you, as if the sound is something new, something dangerous. You exhale, and your breath feels lighter. The next day, the mud returns, thick, deep, and miserable, but you welcome it like an old friend. Because mud means warmth, mud means change. People simply vanish first from conversations, then from chores, then from life. You can smell it when you pass. You turn your head. You lead them into the fields with hands that tremble, not from cold now, but from memory. The body forgets quickly. The mind doesn't. The bread he gives at communion tastes of old flour and mold, but you take it anyway. You hold it on your tongue like something sacred. Maybe it is. It's easier to slip away in sleep, easier to not wake. There's no harvest to mark the weeks, no planting, no feast. Only firewood counts the passage, how quickly the pile shrinks, how often you reforced to burn the stool you once sat on or the shutter from a window too drafty to matter anymore. The hunger becomes something else. It's not just pain in your belly. It seeps into your thoughts. You lose words, then names. You try to ration better, thin the soup, add more water. You use dried herbs with no taste but bulk. The younger ones begin chewing on scraps of leather. The animals begin to die. First the chickens, then the goat. You consider eating the dog, but he's old and bony, and more a comfort than a meal. A woman in the far hut trades the last of her grain for the wreathless silence after her husband steals firewood. A boy sells his shoes to a traveling merchant for dried fish, then freezes 1 foot while walking to the well. A man disappears, and a week later his wife suddenly has meat in the pot. No one asks. No one wants to know what kind. When the priest speaks of purity and sacrifice, the silence in the church is heavier than the cold. He curls up beside the children at night, body heat shared like treasure. You leave him be. You always leave him be. Then there are the choices no one admits to making. People begin marking days by the dead. It was the day after Marta died. 3 days before old Ulrich passed. Funerals are quick now. You begin to see winter in the faces around you, the bones beneath the skin. The priest still gives sermons, but they grow shorter. He begins to look thinner himself. His hands tremble as he lifts the chalice. Then comes the thaw. Not all at once. Just a shift. You begin counting the living instead of the dead. This family survived. That child pulled through. The widow still stands. You rebuild slowly. Patch the roof. Repack the walls with clay. The animals return in spring. Thin, but breathing. And yet, life returns. Shoots of green push through the soil. The sky softens. The fire burns less urgently. You speak of the winter only in fragments. You do not list the names of the lost, because there will be a next time. In Saxony, winter is not a tragedy. It's a truth, a cycle. And when the first frost comes again, as it always will, you will greet it without fear. And in a world where so much is taken from you, survival itself is a quiet act of defiance. Chapter 9. When the Lord rides through, inspections and demands, it starts with the sound of hooves. Not a gallop, nothing so chaotic. It's a steady rhythm, heavy and deliberate, echoing down the frozen lane like a reminder. The men look up from the field. The women pause at the well. Even the children stop mid-step. The sound is unmistakable. The Lord is coming. No one needs to announce it. You felt it in the days leading up. The reeve has been walking faster, checking ledgers twice, snapping at delays. The steward appeared a day early to confirm the guest chamber was warm, the wine cellar full, the guards sober. The priest rehearsed his sermon twice out loud. Even the air feels more brittle, as if it's bracing for a performance. When the Lord arrives, he does not dismount. He does not wave. He rides through the center of the village slowly, flanked by 4 mounted guards in black and red. His cloak is thick wool, dyed deep green, trimmed in something that might be fox. His boots are polished, his beard oiled. His eyes, distant and unmoved, scan the people as if examining the health of livestock. You bow your head, everyone does. Not because he deserves it, but because it's expected. Because the memory of punishment lingers in the air, even if not spoken aloud. You do not know what he looks for, or if he sees anything at all. But when he nods once and turns toward the manor house, you feel the collective breath held by the village exhale, just slightly. This is not a visit of kindness. It never is. When the Lord rides through, it means something is being counted, collected, or corrected. That evening, torches burn at the manor. You watch from a distance as wagons are prepared, parchments carried in and out, and men with stern faces speak quietly while pointing at maps. You don't need to hear the words. You've lived this before. Something is coming. A new tax. A new levy. A demand for timber, for stone, for hands. Sometimes the demand is gold, which no one has. Other times, it's worse. Your time, your body, your sons. At dawn, a horn sounds. The villagers gather in the square. It's not a request. The reeve reads from a parchment with the steward beside him. The Lord watches from horseback, still clean despite the mud. The message is clear. Every household must provide 1 full day of extra labor each week for the next 2 months. A new granary is being constructed near the abbey. The church has asked for help, and the Lord has obliged, and so you will oblige too. There are no objections. There never are. You nod. You bow. You walk back to your hut with the new weight added to your already cracking spine. You try not to think of what that extra day means. Less time to tend your own field, to mend your tools, to rest your legs, to help your aging mother. You simply begin counting the days, reshaping your routine to fit in this new demand like another stone on a wheelbarrow already too full. Later that day, the Lord's men ride through again. Not as a group this time, but in pairs. They inspect the fences, the livestock, the width of the paths. They measure things you do not understand. One speaks of drainage, another of water rights. You do not know what they are planning, but you know it has nothing to do with you. Not really. Your world is something they pass through, not inhabit. One man stops to examine your plow. He prods it with his boot, nods, then makes a mark in a small leather-bound book. You want to ask what it means, but you don't, not with his sword hanging at his side and his silence sharper than anything you could say. That night, the village is quieter than usual. No one plays music, no one drinks. Even the fires burn lower. People speak in murmurs, asking what the new labor will mean for planting, whether the tithe will still be expected, whether they'll be asked to sleep at the worksite. No one knows. No one ever knows. The orders are given from far above, passed down like rain from clouds no one can see. The priest delivers a short blessing. He speaks of duty, of service, of God's reward for humble labor. You nod again. You cross yourself. You say amen. But when the wind cuts through your cloak on the walk home and you see your son coughing by the fire, the words lose their shape. This is the cruelty of the Lord's presence, not the spectacle of violence, not the sharp edge of a sword. It's the casual way demands are made, how little your life matters in the decision, how it is spoken of like an equation, not a sacrifice, how your back will break so that someone else's chapel will be taller, their cellar fuller, and yet you do not hate him. Not exactly. You don't know him well enough to hate. He's like weather force that arrives, disrupts, and leaves. Sometimes kind. Usually not, but always above you. Untouchable. Still, when you lie down that night, your jaw clenched and your hands raw from work, you think of the way he didn't look at your face. The way your child's hands tremble when he lifts a cup now. And you wonder, just briefly, what it would feel like to ride through the village looking down. Just once. The extra labor begins the next morning. The reeve assigns families to teams. Some are sent to cut timber in the forest, others to haul stone from the quarry to the construction site. But this is brute labor. Digging, lifting, dragging. You tear muscle you didn't know you had. Your palms split open and blister again by midday. And you do it not for food, not for your family, not even for your own shelter. You do it so that the bishop's new carts can roll more smoothly, so that the road shines like power beneath his horse. You are told to report to the riverbank where the Lord wants a new road widened. The jokes vanish. Even the children who follow their parents to the site stop asking questions. Not for inspection this time. For sport. He rides with two companions, younger men with bright cloaks and polished bows. They hunt stag in the woods near the river. You see them once laughing, their cheeks pink with wine, their dogs barking. When it is done, there is no ceremony. The bishop does not visit, the Lord does not speak. The reeve simply tells you the quota is complete. You may now return to your regular labor. They do not notice you, though you kneel as they pass. His cloak thicker. The steward's voice has grown sharper, more confident. You catch the scent on the wind, drifting through the village like a ghost. A woman's cough has deepened from weeks spent hauling stone. The lords pass faster now, waving as they ride by. They do not stop. They do not ask how it was built. They do not know your name. A man whose brother died during the second week no longer speaks. He walks, he eats, he obeys. But the light in his eyes is gone. You see it, and you do not ask about it. You know what it means? The children smell it too. You see them pause, nostrils flaring, mouths open slightly, but no one says a word. He issues instructions now with a tone that assumes agreement, not consent. The priest has begun blessing the worksite, sprinkling holy water on stones before they are laid. He speaks of legacy, of building something that will last, but it will not carry your name. The tools are rusted. The fence has collapsed. You do not have the strength to start again, but you do. You always do. Because there's no choice. They see the look in your eyes. They understand. No tools are given. You bring your own. If your shovel breaks, you must fix it. If your foot slips and you twist your ankle, the reeve will mark you as absent, and your penalty will be another day added to your quota. The work is not simply hard. It is unnatural. You are used to the rhythm of farming, of sowing and waiting, of tending and harvesting. No one complains, not openly. But the silence between you all becomes heavier. Words grow fewer. A week passes, then two. The work continues. You notice small changes. The reeve's boots look newer. There's an old man who falls during the third week. He was carrying timber, slipped in the mud, broke his leg badly. The steward orders him carted back to his hut. No physician is called. There is no compensation. He is simply removed from the tally, and his son is told to take his place. The boy is 14. His hands shake when he lifts the axe. The days blend. Your own field suffers. You've lost 3 rows of barley to weeds. The goat's hoof has gone untreated. The thatch above your bed has begun to leak again, but you cannot stop. The steward reminds everyone this is God's work, and to defy it is to defy heaven. When someone points out that the road leads not to a chapel, but to the hunting lodge, he is beaten behind the granary, where no one can see. The Lord returns briefly during the 4th week. That evening, a deer carcass is hung near the manor. By morning, the meat is gone. You return to the road. It's almost finished now, smooth, wide, lined with stones pulled by aching backs and bleeding hands. The regular labor. You return to your field and find that the weeds have won. The extra work has ended, but the cost remains. A child limps where he once ran, and what of the road? It glistens when it rains. The carts roll smoothly. But when they ride through the village, they see straight faces, bowed heads, quiet mouths. That is what they wanted. That is what they built. Not just a road, but a silence. Chapter 10. Feasting in a Saxon noble's timber hall. The hall stands at the top of the rise, just beyond the bend in the river. You've seen it from a distance all your life. A tall structure of oak beams and daub, its steep thatched roof lined with carved animal heads. Its walls smeared in lime wash that catches the late sun. It looms like a separate world. You don't go near it unless summoned. Not because of fear exactly, but because it isn't meant for you. It is a place of warmth, of abundance, of music and meat and color. A place where the air smells of roasted game and spiced wine, while your world smells of boiled roots and wet soil. Today, you are summoned. Not to join the feast, but to serve. The reeve selects 3 men and 4 women to help prepare and deliver food to the timber hall. A visiting thane from the south is staying with your lord, and tradition demands a celebration. You're told to wash, to comb your hair, to wear your least-patched tunic. The priest offers a quick blessing. The steward inspects your hands. You are not to speak unless spoken to. You are not to eat unless permitted. You're not to linger. The walk to the hall is uphill, your hands gripping baskets of dried apples, cheese, barley loaves. As you approach, the sound reaches you first. A low hum of voices, laughter, the sharp trill of a harp string being tuned. Then the smells: venison fat sizzling, onions and herbs, smoke from hardwood fires, and underneath it all, a sweetness like honey warming on a stove. Inside, the hall is unlike anything you've ever stood within. It is high-ceilinged and smoky, but not like your hut spitter smoke. This is fragrant, floating from incense and torches. The beams are carved with animals and twisting vines. Wall hangings depict battles you've only heard of in stories, saints surrounded by golden halos, and hunting scenes where dogs chase deer through forests that look nothing like your own. The floor is strewn with rushes, but they've been mixed with dried herbs, lavender, rosemary, and sage. With each step you crush them, releasing scent beneath your feet. Long tables line the room, already groaning with platters of bread, roasted birds, cheeses, and glazed root vegetables. At the far end, the Lord sits in a raised chair. Beside him, the guest, broad-shouldered and red-cheeked, laughs so loudly it shakes the beams. You walk quietly, placing pitchers of ale on the table, laying down the bread, keeping your eyes lowered. You catch glimpses of the guests, men with silver pins on their cloaks, women in dresses dyed with colors you've never worn. One of them wears a ring the size of your thumb joint, crusted with stones. She speaks in a soft voice, but servants rush to her every time she gestures. They eat slowly, casually, as if hunger is something optional. A boar is brought in next massive roasted whole, its mouth stuffed with apples. The aroma is dizzying. The skin crackles as the steward carves. You swallow hard. One of the guests notices. He laughs and throws a chunk of meat at your feet. You do not move. You wait for instruction. The steward shakes his head almost imperceptibly. You pick up the meat only when it is offered again, placed directly in your hands. It is greasy and still warm. You eat it in 2 bites and thank no one. You simply nod and step back. Later, the music begins. A man with a harp sings of old battles, of noble bloodlines, of dragons and oaths. The lords nod, the ladies smile. The song means nothing to you. You are still thinking of the meat, of how rich it tasted, of how long it's been since you've had anything like it. That flavor will stay in your mouth for hours, days maybe. You wipe down a spill with a cloth that feels softer than your own bedding. You lift a jug made of pewter, heavy in your hands. When the Lord speaks, everyone goes silent. Even his laughter carries weight. When he raises a toast, everyone drinks. You pretend not to watch, but you do. You study their movements, their ease, the way they lean back without fear of spilling or breaking something they cannot replace. You surf through the night. The laughter grows louder. The room grows hotter. The torches flicker and gutter and are replaced. Plates are scraped clean and refilled. Wine stains the tablecloth. The harpist's fingers grow raw. Still, the feast continues. You think of your family back in the hut. They are likely eating boiled grain tonight. No meat, no cheese, no laughter. You think of your wife's cracked hands, your daughter's hollow cheeks. The gap feels wider now. Not just in wealth, but in reality. This world, with its glittering walls and golden goblets, might as well be another planet. And yet, you are not angry. Not yet. You are numb, exhausted, entranced. Because as much as this hall shows you what you lack, it also reminds you what is possible. That somewhere in the same village where you pull weeds from frozen earth, there are men feasting beside carved lions and women wrapped in fur. The contrast is not just cruel, it's surreal. Eventually you are told to leave. You step out into the cold night air, the sound of laughter still ringing in your ears. Your stomach growls again. That bite of boar already feels like a memory. You walk down the hill slowly. Your boots are soaked. Your hands sticky with fat. Your heart strangely quiet. You return to your hut, duck inside, and see your son asleep beside the fire. You pull the blanket over him, sit in silence, and stare at the wall. You do not speak of what you saw. Not because it is forbidden, but because it is too far away to explain. The feast ends, as they always do, not with ceremony, but with a kind of unraveling. The wine runs low, the laughter becomes hoarse, and the nobles begin to lean more heavily in their chairs. A few slip into sleep where they sit, heads resting against polished table edges, wine still staining their beards. The harpist is gone now, his work finished, and a pair of serving boys sweep the rushes near the door where someone was sick an hour ago. You are still there, still standing, waiting for dismissal. But there's more to be done. After the guests leave or are carried out, you're sent back in. The noble hall, so grand and glowing just hours earlier, is now a battlefield of indulgence. Bones litter the table, goblets lie overturned in puddles of wine, and wax drips down every surface. The smell has changed too. The sweetness is gone. Now it's sour, greasy, heavy, like a kitchen left too long after fire. You are handed rags, buckets, and dull knives. You scrape meat from plates, fold soiled linens, mop up drops of sauce that have congealed into smears. You're not alone. The other servants work silently, eyes low, hands quick. No one speaks unless necessary. No one whistles. This is not a moment for joy, only obedience. Outside, the snow has started again. The manor firewood is abundant, each hearth still roaring, but you are offered no place beside it. You are told to clean the stables next. The visiting noble's horse slipped in the slush earlier, and the steward blames the straw. You shovel the mixture of mud, dung, and hay, your arms aching, the cold creeping into your wrists. In the early morning, before the sky turns fully gray, a few leftovers are handed to you in a wooden bowl. A thin slice of blood pudding, the heel of a rye loaf, a wedge of smoked cheese, so hard your teeth struggle to bite it. You do not complain. You eat quickly, sitting on a barrel behind the kitchen. The smoke from the chimney rises above you, disappearing into the clouds like something imagined. You watch as servants inside the hall reset the tables for breakfast. The nobles will rise soon. They'll expect porridge, fresh eggs, warmed cider. They'll want their shoes dried, their cloaks aired, their complaints heard. And all of it will fall again to the same hands that have never rested. By midday, you're back in the village. The reeve notes your return. You're expected in the fields again by tomorrow. No exceptions. No consideration for the work you've just done. That night, your arms throb in bed. Your legs twitch, still mimicking the day's effort, even in sleep. You dream of tables groaning under the weight of food, but you do not eat in the dream. You only serve. In the days that follow, Rumors spread. Some say the visiting noble brought news of a rebellion in the south. Others whisper that he's marrying the Lord's daughter. A few claim he's promised gold for the new road, which would mean more carts, more trade, and perhaps more labor. But you don't believe any of it. Not because it is impossible, but because it doesn't matter. Feasts come and go. Lords visit and depart. The hall is cleaned, the bones discarded, the stories fade. But the road remains muddy, your tools remain broken, and your stomach growls the same. Nothing changes, except that each feast reminds you how little you have. One evening you pass a man sharpening a knife near the forge. He looks up, nods, and says nothing. But in the distance, you hear laughter coming from the manor. The glow from the windows flickers across the road. Another feast, perhaps. Another toast raised in your direction, though not in your honor. They speak of loyalty, service, the faithful peasantry. They never say your name. A child asks you what it was like inside the hall. You pause. You could tell him about the fire, the gold, the music, the scent of roasted pheasant. You could describe the fur-lined cloaks, the tapestries of distant lands, the bowls carved from ivory. But instead you shake your head. You say only that it was bright, too bright, and that he should focus on his chores. Because once you see that world up close, it doesn't leave you. Not fully. You carry it home like smoke in your clothes, tangible but unreachable, a reminder of what you are not, and what you will never be. Chapter 11. Candlemas, Crosses, and the Calendar of Saints. You wake with frost on your blanket and the bells already ringing. Is Candlemas today, one of the holy days? A turning point in the winter calendar, when the church blesses the year's candles and prays for light in the months ahead. But to you, it means something else entirely. It means more chores, more ritual, more time spent not in the field, but under the eye of the priest. It is the day Mary presented Jesus in the temple, a day of purification. You don't understand all of it, but you understand that you must gather early, before light, carrying candles to be blessed. You nod, grateful, even though you know that half will be burned within the month during nightly chores or sickbed vigils. There will be a fast in 2 weeks, a vigil for St. Blaise, a procession for the feast of the chair of St. Peter. Each one will require your presence, your time, your labor, for every holy day that brings rest from the fields. Another demands work for the church cleaning, gathering herbs, weaving altar cloths, carrying stones. Still, there's comfort in them. In their smell, their light, their warmth against cold fingers. Pentecost brings flowers, but you must fetch them from the forest. Or kneel in mud to confess that you stole an onion. But you do not ask. The questions belong to men with books in Latin. You didn't believe her, but the crosses were pretty, and she smiled when she made them. Now you make them too. You place one above your door, not because it works, but because it is what is done. You belong to the land, and to the turning wheel of feasts and fasts. The grain stores are low, the weather uncertain, the sicknesses deepening. People look to their candles like charms. A woman in the village marks a cross and soot above every doorway. A boy refuses to speak all morning, saying he is fasting in honor of St. Cuthbert. The reeve rolls his eyes at both, but says nothing. Even he knows not to challenge the strange faiths of the season. Michaelmas means goose if you're lucky, but also the reckoning of rents. Even All Saints' Day, which promises prayer and remembrance, brings long hours in the graveyard, clearing weeds and straightening bones that rise from the soil like forgotten warnings. The ones you've made are rough dipped unevenly in beeswax. Wicks tilted. A few already bent from storage, but they are all you have. You hold them in a bundle, careful not to drop any, as you follow the others to the chapel. You tuck them above the hearth, in a shelf where you keep your sewing needle and your grandfather's knife. You plant not when the soil feels ready, but after rogation days, but because it is the one constant in a life of change. Lords die. Crops fail. Taxes rise. But the saints' names return each year, their days printed on faded scraps of parchment nailed to the chapel wall. Their stories retold in the same soft tones by the priest beside the altar. You do not slaughter your pig when it fattens, but after the feast of St. Martin. You marry only in certain months, avoid certain foods in others, and cross yourself each time you pass the chapel door, even when your hands are too dirty for prayer. They sit there like protection, even if they offer no heat. The calendar of saints rules your life as firmly as the seasons, if not more so. Where the soil gives hints of when to plant and harvest, the church dictates when to kneel, when to fast, when to confess. Each day is not just a date, but a dedication to St. Agatha, St. Boniface, St. Brigid, St. Ulrich. His voice echoes off the walls, speaking Latin phrases that you've heard so many times they've become like song familiar, but still indecipherable. He blesses the candles, sprinkles holy water, and waves incense in wide circles that make your eyes water. Then he lights one taper, and from that flame, all others are lit. The glow spreads slowly through the room, small dots of gold flickering in the gray morning. Some protect livestock. Others are called upon in sickness. A few are so obscure no one remembers why their name is spoken at all. But still the bells toll and the prayers are said. Candlemas comes 40 days after the birth of Christ, or so the priest says. Inside the chapel smells of damp stone, smoke, and wool. The priest is already robed. You are told that the candles will protect your home from storms, lightning, and sickness, that they are holy, sacred, not to be wasted. After the ceremony, the priest reads a list of upcoming observances. The sacred calendar is relentless. Lent comes with hunger, Easter with long, cold mornings. But Candlemas is especially solemn. It carries with it the fear of late winter, the uncertain time. You walk home with your blessed candles in a bundle, wrapped in an old cloth. The rhythm of the year is shaped by these days. Not by your needs, but by the church's. You do not question this. Not because you fear the church, though you do. Sometimes you wonder who chose these days. Who decided that you would rise before light to light candles, or walk barefoot around the chapel 3 times to cure a fever? You remember being a child, watching your mother weave tiny straw crosses for the feast of St. Brigid. She said they kept the mice away. There is comfort in doing what is done. As the weeks pass beyond Candlemas, winter begins to pull away from the earth, inch by inch, though you hardly notice at first. The snow turns to slush, the sun lingers a little longer in the sky, and the birds return with their thin, rasping songs. He reads aloud the sins that must be purged: gluttony, lust, pride. The wind is sharp, the ground still frozen, but you trudge forward with your neighbors, holding branches and hoping the saints are listening. A boy forgets a line and weeps openly. His father strikes him later behind the chapel, thinking it will make him stronger. It does not. The boy limps for days, and the next time his name is called, he doesn't speak at all. The priest calls this humility. They are woven into every moment of your existence. You must not wash clothes on St. Anne's Day. You must not plant beans during Holy Week. The way the villagers sing together, awkwardly but earnestly, their voices cracking in unison. You are summoned to dig drainage ditches near the boundary wall to help the priest plant medicinal herbs in the chapel garden. To walk 4 miles on St. George's Day to the shrine where an old statue is said to cry blood in springtime. You don't believe it cries, but you go anyway. You always go. Once Pentecost fades, the days march toward the feast of St. John, when fires will be lit on the hills and people will jump across the flames to protect their herds. Now you mark time in saints and fasts, vigils, and blessings. Your calendar is not paper, but memory and ritual. And though you cannot read, you know it by heart. You will jump too if your knees allow it, because protection, like faith, is something you cannot afford to question. The bread you are given after Mass, thick with honey and made by the widow who lives near the forge. They make demands, offer blessings, watch from above. They do not labor. They are distant, yet their presence is everywhere. It flickers weakly in a damp air. Your wife says a short prayer to St. Apollonia for your aching tooth, though you both know it's rotting and nothing short of a miracle will fix it. Still, you feel calmer. Not healed, but watched. Perhaps that is enough. Painted on the walls, sewn into the altar cloths, carved into the ends of benches. Every birth is celebrated with a name from their ranks, every death marked with prayers to them. Even your tools are sometimes scratched with their symbols, as if asking their permission to be used. It is sweet, and you eat it slowly, trying to make the moment stretch. The light coming through the chapel windows sometimes feels like a blessing in itself, even if you're not sure where it comes from. You must turn your shoes to face the door on St. Margaret's Eve, or risk bad dreams. These rules pile on top of the Lord's commands, on top of the Reeve's punishments, until your life feels as if it's being played out from a script written by men you've never met, and stories half remembered from firelit sermons. Another day, you help scrub the chapel floor with a handful of reeds dipped in water that smells of vinegar and herbs. The priest tells you it is for purification. You say nothing, but your hands stain for hours afterward. You do not understand how any serf could be accused of too much food or pleasure, but you nod along with the others. You kneel on the stone floor until your knees ache. There is Plough Monday, when the plough is decorated and dragged through the village before real work begins again in the fields. You remember watching it as a child, how the ribboned oxen seemed almost proud. Now, as a grown man, you only feel the weight of the coming season. The blessed tools are still heavy, the mud just as deep. You cross yourself when the ashes are placed on your forehead. You thank God for the discipline, even when your stomach turns in knots by nightfall. But with the thaw comes Lent, and its rules are as strict as the cold. Meat disappears from your bowl entirely. Even the lords abstain, though their versions of suffering look very different. Where you have broth, they have trout. Where you go hungry, they go sober. The priest reminds everyone that fasting is a gift to God. Each week brings new observance. One day you walk in a procession around the fields, chanting prayers for a good harvest. On St. Benedict's Day, the children are made to recite their prayers in front of the whole village. Some of the holy days are tied to the land. You begin to see how the saints do not just bless, but bind. There are moments of beauty still. The way the altar gleams on Easter morning. But even these moments are fleeting. Because once the feast ends, the duties resume. You begin to realize that the saints are not so different from the lords. One night, after working too long in the rain, you light one of the blessed candles from Candlemas. There is no end to the cycle. Once Lent ends, Pentecost begins. You do not remember when you stop thinking of the year in months. You know when to kneel, when to sing, when to weep, when to fear. The saints never speak to you, but still you answer. Chapter 12, Witches, Charms, and the Forest Via. The forest begins just beyond the barley fields, a dense wall of bark and shadow. It is not a place you go often, and never alone. It's said to be sacred or cursed, depending on who you ask. The old men call it the godwood, the priest calls it a pagan remnant. But to you, it's simply there, watching, breathing, bolder than any lord or chapel. The trees lean in like listeners. The wind doesn't whistle so much as whisper. You venture into it only when you must. For mushrooms, firewood, berries, if the yield has failed, but you never wander. You keep to the worn paths and mark your way with stones, the way your father taught you. You don't stray near the marshy bend where the standing stones lie. You avoid the twisted oak that smells faintly of ash even when it rains. And you never, ever speak aloud. People say the forest has ears, and sometimes they say it answers. In Saxony, the old ways live longer than the church likes to admit. The villagers know their prayers, but they also remember charms. You've seen your grandmother murmur into bowls of water, drop iron nails into the well to trap the fever. You've watched your cousin burn horsehair when the cows refused to feed, smoke curling around her like a halo. None of it is written. None of it is taught in daylight. But it's known, passed down like a family name. The priest rails against it. He speaks of devils, of witchcraft, of hell's temptations lurking in every herb not blessed by holy water. But even he drinks the tea made by the widow in the woods when his lungs begin to rattle in winter. He never thanks her. But he always returns. That widow Magda, they call her, is not feared, but she's not quite trusted either. She lives in a thatched hut deeper into the forest's edge, where the ground grows soft and mushrooms rise like bone from the earth. Her hair is silver, her teeth missing, her hands quick. She speaks little, but her eyes see everything. Children are warned not to follow her. Adults go to her only at night. When your sister falls ill, feverish, shaking, eyes rolling back, you go to Magda. Not the priest, not the reeve, because no one else will come. Her hut smells of sage, old wood, and something sharp you can't name. She doesn't look up as you enter. She only says, "How long has it been?" You tell her. She nods, reaches for a pouch, and hands you dried leaves wrapped in wax cloth. Steep these in goat's milk, 3 times a day. Do not pray over it. Do not speak of it. Burn the rest when she's well. You obey. Your sister recovers. Slowly, but surely. You say nothing to anyone, not even your mother, because this help comes with a cost. Not in coin, but in silence. The forest holds stories you are not meant to understand. Some say it shelters the spirits of those who died without burial. Others whisper that the ancient gods still linger there, buried in root and stone. There are places where birds do not sing, where the light never falls right, where you feel watched though no one is near. One boy claims he saw a woman with fox eyes walking between the trees, barefoot, leaving no prints in the snow. Another swears he heard a child crying in a hollow stump, only to find it empty when he looked. Most laugh these tales away. But no one forgets them. Sometimes the strange things are closer. A hen lays blood-spotted eggs. A dog howls at the same hour 3 nights in a row. A child wakes with scratches on their back and no memory of a fall. When enough of these happen, people begin to look sideways. At the lonely, the ugly, the quiet, and then the word is spoken. Which is not shouted. It is whispered, passed from tongue to ear like a disease, a sickness of suspicion. One said it cannot be unsaid. The last accusation came 2 winters ago. A woman who kept to herself, who spoke to birds and wore bells on her apron. They said she soured milk with her stare, that the crops died around her door, that her breath made infants sick. The reeve called for her to be questioned. The priest arrived with his psalter. She was not beaten, not publicly, but she vanished. Her house was burned. Her name is no longer spoken. You wonder if she was truly a witch, but the truth doesn't matter. Not here. Not in the silence between the trees or the cold books of the village. Everyone believes in something. And belief in a place like this is a dangerous thing. The fear never leaves. It simply settles into the rhythm of life, like smoke into thatch. You learn not to look too long at the woman with the crooked fingers. You teach your children to tie red thread around their wrists during thunder. Not because it makes sense, but because your grandmother did the same for you. These are protections that live in the margins, between belief and habit, between prayer and instinct. If a child is missing, they search the trees. If a sickness spreads, someone always suggests it came from the woods. But it's also where people flee when they have nowhere else to go. The exiled, the accused, the broken. Not just with wolves and wind, but with memory. It remembers the footsteps of every trespasser, every offering, every broken oath. You wear sprigs of rue on your belt during harvest. You place iron keys beneath your mattress to ward off nightmares. A handful of salt is thrown into the fire when a guest leaves unexpectedly. You don't know why. But not doing it feels wrong. Once, after a storm uprooted a pine near the edge of the woods, a group of men tried to cut it down for firewood. The axe blades dulled. One man slipped and broke his arm. It gives as much as it takes. It offers bark for aching joints, mushrooms for sore bellies, roots that soothe when the pain won't leave. You will not ask too much. You will not stay too long. You will leave offerings when you take. And you will look away if something in the shadows looks back. It is cruel and generous in turns, like the seasons, like the world. You don't speak of them. Not even to your wife. Some say these are visits. Others say they're warnings. The priest may warn of heresy, but he still blesses the fields with salt. He may condemn Magda, but he buries her brother in consecrated ground. The villagers nod at sermons and murmur their own prayers at night whispers to saints and shadows, both. One man once admitted to dreaming of the same tree every night for a month, until lightning split it in half during a summer storm. like the memory of a child's laugh that ends too suddenly. It shapes your choices without ever raising its voice. He moved away not long after. Another found his wife bleeding from the nose that night, her bed soaked with sweat. No one said it aloud, but the tree was left where it lay, still half standing, still watching. They vanish into the trees and are spoken only in hush and rumor. She says nothing happened. But that night, she refuses to sleep near the window. You do not press. You hang garlic on the lintel. You murmur around in a language you half remember. It is enough, or you hope it is. Sometimes you see the priest look out at the forest during Mass, his gaze lingering a little too long beyond the chapel windows. He preaches loudly against sorcery, but his hands tremble when he blesses the fields. A neighbor's cow gives birth to a calf with one blind eye. The villagers murmur. A girl develops a rash that refuses to heal. Too afraid of the punishment, he slipped away before dawn, carrying only a cloak and a crust. Not just living in it, but absorbed by it, changed. Magda, the healer, might have once been like them. Not born in shadows, but pulled there slowly, until the village forgot her face and only remembered the shape of her silhouette in the trees. He was seen weeks later by a woodcutter pale, thinner, wild-eyed, living in a hollow under a fallen beech. No one brought him back. It was understood. He'd chosen the forest now, or it had chosen him. A shepherd claims his flock grew restless at night without cause. Each of these incidents might mean nothing, but together they stitch a thread of anxiety through the village. He says the forest is full of God's creatures, but he never enters it alone. The seasons shift and spring brings new concerns. In times of hardship, the forest becomes both threat and refuge. A boy named Rollo once ran off after being caught stealing a loaf from the manor kitchen. You sometimes wonder if they become part of the forest. The old tales say the forest is alive. Folk charms are sewn into everyday life. And then there are the dreams. They don't happen often, but when they do, you wake with a pressure in your chest, a taste of ash in your mouth, and the feeling that something followed you out of sleep. The lines between church and charm grow blurrier in private moments. You begin to understand that fear isn't always loud. Sometimes it is quiet and constant, like the sound of wind in the upper branches. One autumn evening, your daughter returns late from gathering kindling. Her eyes are wide, her face pale. For all its threats, the forest is also part of you. There's a wordless agreement between you and the trees. No one teaches you these rules, but you know them as surely as you know how to plant, how to kneel, how to carry silence like a shield. You are a serf in Saxony, but in the forest, you are something smaller, something quieter, something that listens. Chapter 13, A Serf's Funeral into the Earth Again. It begins in silence. No bells, no official notice. Just a neighbor's knock at dawn, a bowed head, a murmured name. Someone has died. You don't ask how? Not at first. You only nod and begin to dress for the day. There is wood to gather, a grave to dig, and a body to carry. Death is not rare in your village. It arrives in winter with its gnawing hunger, in summer with fevers, in childbirth, in accident, in sleep. You stopped asking why a long time ago. The man who died this time is old Hanno. His house stood near the stream, crooked and patched with moss. He had no wife. His children all gone, some to the next village, one lost to the last famine. One vanished into the woods years ago. He'd been quiet in his last years, still tending to his sheep, still coming to Mass. His voice was weak, but his eyes stayed sharp. You remember him once gave you a turnip during a lean season. No words, just the gesture. Now he lies wrapped in rough linen, laid out on a low table inside his hut. His face is hollowed by age, but peaceful. The priest will come to read the rites, but not yet. There are others to summon first. Funerals in your village are not grand events. There is no marble, no carved stones, no lines of mourners in black. Just neighbors, just earth. Just a little time set aside before the fieldwork resumes. You are one of those chosen to dig. The soil is still half frozen, and the grave must be shallow. Deeper would take too long, risk injury, and the others are needed for the rest of the work. You do not complain. You understand. The dead do not care about depth. As your spade strikes the ground, you hear the others gathering behind you. A pair of women bring strips of linen for the wrapping. Someone else carries a crude wooden cross, not carved, just tied together with twine. It will mark the spot for a while, until rain and wind take it. Most markers don't last long. Eventually, the grave is just another patch of grass, indistinguishable from the rest. The priest arrives, robes patched and damp from the mist. He blesses the body. He says Hannah's name, speaks Latin phrases that only a few understand. He sprinkles holy water, then holds out his hand for the small sack of barley that each family contributes. It's not a fee, exactly, but a custom, payment for prayers. You hand yours over without a word. There are no eulogies, no story shared aloud. But memory lives in looks and gestures. The old woman who once lent Hannah a blanket places a small carved figure in the folds of the shroud. The boy he once rescued from a freezing ditch stands at the back, clutching a sprig of rosemary. No one mentions these things. They are witnessed, not spoken. When the time comes, you lift the body with the others and walk the short path to the burial plot. There's no real cemetery, just a fenced patch beside the chapel, uneven and weathered. Some graves are marked. Most are not. You lower him in gently. The priest says a final blessing. The dirt is returned. Afterward, the people drift back to their work. There's no feast, no song, just the quiet resumption of chores. The widow who helped wrap Hannah now kneels by her goat, checking its hooves. The boy with the rosemary is called by his mother. You wash your hands in the stream, the cold water burning your fingertips. By evening, it's as if nothing happened. The field needs tending. The tools must be mended. But when you pass the grave on your way home, you pause, just for a moment. You notice that someone has placed a flat stone at the head, etched with a single mark, a line with a circle. It's not a name, but maybe it's enough. Death for a serf is not a moment of glory. It's not weighed with ceremony or gifts. It's a return to the soil. A quiet subtraction from the world. There is no inheritance to pass down. No wealth to divide. Only debts, tools, perhaps a cloak or a knife, handed to a neighbor or left to rust. The land you worked is not yours. It returns to the Lord's books as a vacant line, ready for another name. Sometimes the priest speaks of heaven. He says the meek shall inherit the earth. But when you look at the tilled rows, the broken huts, the rough hands around you, it's hard to imagine what that inheritance will be. Perhaps only peace, perhaps only quiet, but even that feels distant. That night, the village is quiet. Not silent, but softer than usual. You sit near the hearth with your family, eating slowly. The stew tastes thin, but it warms you. Outside, the wind moves across the roofs like a slow breath. You glance toward the chapel, half hidden in the dark, where the grave lies newly covered. You don't pray, but you think, that's enough. The children ask who Hannah was. Your wife tells them he once sang songs during harvest. That he made whistles from reeds for the little ones and sharpened blades better than a blacksmith. These things don't seem important to you in life, but they grow larger in death. The smallest kindness becomes a kind of legacy, passed down through hushed memories. In the coming days, Hannah fades from the daily rhythm. His house sits empty. The reeve says it may go to a new tenant by month's end. His belongings, meager as they were, will be divided or absorbed, an axe here, a pot there, a threadbare cloak passed down to a boy who's outgrown his own. Nothing is wasted, not out of reverence, but out of necessity. What cannot be used will be burned, not in a pyre, but in the hearts of the poor. You watched it happen once. A dying man's stool used as firewood by a neighbor. No one judged. No one asked permission. When you have nothing, even the dead give. You sometimes wonder if it will be the same for you. Likely it will. A shallow grave. A handful of hands to lift you. A name spoken for the last time before it disappears, like smoke from the chimney. But you're not afraid. Not really. There is something almost comforting about the simplicity of it. No expectations. No afterlife debt. Just sleep. Long and undisturbed. Still, part of you wishes for more. A stone that lasts. A name carved into something solid. Not for vanity, but for permanence. proof that you lived, that your body bent over fields, that your voice joined in the evening chants, that your hands held tools, bread, another's hand, that you mattered, even if only in a small, fleeting way, but you know the truth. You've seen it with your own eyes. Even the wooden crosses rot. Even the names fade. A few years pass and the grave becomes just another patch of grass. Someone might walk across it without knowing. A cow might graze nearby. The earth swallows all in time. There are stories of graves that never rest. Places where the ground sinks or strange flowers grow. One woman said she felt cold fingers tug her apron while walking past the old burial plot. Another claimed she saw a flicker of fire without flame above a grave one night. No one investigates. Some stories are better left unexplored. The church teaches that souls rest, that good men ascend, that sinners suffer. But those are distant ideas wrapped in Latin and incense. What you see, what you know, is different. Death does not feel like a door. It feels like a return. Not up, not down, but back. To mud, to dust, to the land. There is a strange equality in death. The Lord may have silk and marble, gold candelabras, and singing choirs at his passing. But in the ground the worm sees no rank, bones are bones, and rot does not discriminate. You see noble tombs cracked by roots, their carvings worn smooth by time. The world remembers what it wants and forgets the rest. Sometimes a bard comes through the village, singing songs of heroes and kings. He tells of grand funerals, burning boats, mountain cairns, the sky split with mourning. The children listen wide-eyed. You listen too. But when he leaves, you return to your own reality, where the songs end, where death is a wrapped body, a borrowed shovel, and a few muttered words in the cold. You visit Hanno's grave once more, just before the first frost. There's no marker now. The twine that bound the cross has snapped. The wood has fallen, half covered in leaves. You kneel anyway, not to pray, but to remember. You say nothing. There's no need, the ground knows. And in the stillness, you feel something heavy settle in your chest. Not grief, exactly. Something older. Something made of years and toil and silence. You carry it with you when you rise, when you walk back to the field, when the wind stings your face and the sky remains gray. You know your time will come. Maybe soon. Maybe not, but it will come. And when it does, you hope there's someone left to speak your name, even if just once. Even if only to the trees. The idea arrives like a whisper, too quiet to name it first. It might begin as a passing comment, a tale heard in the market, or a story muttered by a traveler with muddy boots and sharp eyes. It surfaces while you carry water, while you mend tools, while the reeve measures your grain with eyes that weigh more than the scales. If the priest knows, he may speak of duty, of sin, of eternal damnation, so the thought stays hidden, but not idle. It grows, like a sprout beneath frost, waiting for the thaw. A year and a day. It does not seem like much, but it means everything. There are towns, they say, far from here where a man may walk unbound, where the land is not owned by lords but guarded by walls and laws. Free towns. Places where a serf, if he survives a year and a day without being caught, becomes a free man. Family tools, huts they built with their own hands. They walk with nothing but a sack and a name they never speak again. You ask the merchant how long it takes to reach the northern towns. During work, while digging, while waiting for the stew to boil, you imagine walking freely. Eating bread you bought with your own coin, sitting in a room with walls that do not leak. A bed made for one, just arms strong from bellows and skin marked by soot. Some say he fell in the river, others say he went east. The reeve says nothing. But for days afterward, the smith walks with a limp and a look that says more than words. He shrugs, says it depends on the roads, the weather, the luck. You ask the miller what it's like in the cities, what you'd carry, where you'd hide, which saints you'd pray to, whether you'd leave a note, whether you'd come back someday. He laughs, says they stink worse than pigs, but no one bows to anyone. If he's walking now on a dirt road toward a town with spires and gates and bread that doesn't run out, he says a man can earn silver just by knowing how to count sacks, that bakeries stay warm even in winter, that no one gets whipped for sleeping late. And for the first time, you can imagine something more. If they make it, they say the town grants them shelter. That guards protect the gates. That after a year and a day, no lord may claim them. That freedom becomes law. A murmur from the woods, two men talking low. You can't hear everything, but one phrase stands clear, north before snow. Who disappears for hours and returns with no explanation. Who looks restless when the priest speaks of obedience. It's subtle, but it's there. The hunger for more, not food, not comfort, just space. A place where every breath doesn't feel borrowed. You do not turn to look. You pretend to hear nothing. But later you return to that spot just to see if there are tracks. A few vanish, marched off in chains, never seen again. You've heard rumors of one man being hung from the manor gate as a warning. Whether true or not doesn't matter. This fear is real. There are. Fresh. Leading away from the manor, deeper into the forest. You have never seen one. You do not even know where the nearest might lie. But the thought clings to you. No one talks of escape aloud. It's too dangerous. The manor is filled with ears. If the reeve suspects, you're watched. One night, while tending to a dying sheep near the tree line, you hear it again. You begin to watch others differently. Who lingers at the edge of the village? Leaving is no small thing. If caught, the punishment is brutal. Some are branded on the cheek. Others lose a hand. And yet, each year, someone tries. They leave behind everything. It sounds like a miracle. You begin asking questions carefully, wrapped in other topics. You begin to dream of it. Not just at night, it is just a dream. But dreams are dangerous in Saxony. One evening, the blacksmith's apprentice vanishes. He had no family, no wife. You wonder if the apprentice made it. You begin to plan, not in detail, just enough to feel the edges of it. It is not that you hate your village. It's that you have known nothing else. The road to a free town is not drawn on any parchment you own. It exists as a direction, a guess, a string of whispered advice passed from lips that won't admit to speaking. Travel is dangerous, even without the fear of being hunted. He doesn't bow to anyone. He came from somewhere he wasn't born to his clothes. You've watched him walk with his own pace, not with the shuffle of duty. You wonder how far he traveled, what he left behind. Whether it was worth it? There are wolves. There are bandits. There are nights so cold your fingers forget how to move. You ask gently if she's ever thought about leaving. She doesn't look up. She just presses her palm deeper into the bread. Then she says, just once, only when it rains. You need to walk by moonlight, sleep hidden beneath leaves, drink from ditches, barter when you can, steal if you must. Every time your body aches from labor that earns nothing but another day's food. His cloak is worn, his eyes hard, his shoes mended with twine. He asks only if this path leads east. You nod. He thanks you and walks on. You watch him until he vanishes over the ridge. You say nothing to anyone. Every time the wind carries with it the sound of something distant, a bell, perhaps, or a horn, or just a different kind of silence. No crumbs, no wrapper, just the stone, exactly where you left it. You need to become someone else, not a peasant, not a servant, not even a pilgrim, but a shadow who hopes. The stories say if you reach the town and keep your head down for a year and a day, no lord can drag you back. It lives not in cities, not behind stone walls or merchant laws, but in the way you imagine what could be. And maybe one day your son will go, or your daughter, or someone else who remembers this place, its fields, its forest, its silence. And maybe if they make it, they'll speak your name in a new place. Just once, quietly, like a prayer. In the stolen moment beneath a tree. In the way your feet sometimes step slower when no one is looking. In how you teach your children to question, softly, the way things are. The town becomes your shield. The law becomes your cloak. But they also say lords send riders to reclaim what's theirs. That some towns accept bribes to get fugitives back. That freedom has a price, and sometimes is paid in blood or silence or never seeing your family again. Still, some make it. You know, this. You've seen the merchant's assistant, A man with clipped speech and hands too soft for the field. On a morning thick with fog, you speak softly to your wife as she needs know. Escape isn't just a journey, it's a severing. You may never return, you may never write. You may not live to tell anyone it happened. And if you die on the road, there's no marker, no name, only bones somewhere between here and there. You both know what that means. Most who stay for others. For children, for parents, for promises made under candlelight and sky. But there's another kind of freedom, a quieter one. You do not run, not this year, but you think about it. Every time the reef passes, one day you meet a stranger on the road. He says little. That night you bury a loaf and a piece of cheese beneath a stone by the well. No one sees you. In the morning, it's gone. You do not ask who took it. You just smile a little. And return to work. The town is still out there. So is the road. And in that moment, the surf becomes something else. Not free, perhaps, but remembered. And that, too, is a kind of escape. And now, as the fields of Saxony fade behind us and the candlelight of timber halls flickers into memory, we return slowly to the present. You've wandered far tonight, through frostbitten mornings and smoke-filled huts, through forests thick with whispers and chapels echoing with half-forgotten prayers. You've walked in worn shoes, bent your back to the soil, and glimpsed the world through the eyes of those who live not for glory or wealth, but simply for one more day. Being a serf in the 11th century wasn't marked by milestones or dramatic turning points. It was marked by repetition. Wake, work, wait, serve, bow, survive. It was a life shaped by land and law, by the seasons and by silence. And yet, within that quiet, within the grueling predictability of a life controlled by others, there were still small acts of defiance, small moments of beauty. The whisper of escape, the scent of bread, a glance shared between souls who knew how heavy the days could be. It's easy now, from the warmth of your room or the safety of your bed, to imagine those lives as distant and alien. But if you look closely, you'll find echoes of them in your own. The need for belonging, the quiet pride in finishing a task, the worry over a cold winter or a sick child, the way people love despite the weight of their world. These things don't vanish with time. They settle, instead, into new forms. The faces change. The tools change. But the rhythm of life, the desire to find meaning in toil, to seek peace in the dark remains. As you lay back now, eyes growing heavier, let your thoughts drift not to lords and laws, but to the ones who lived quietly between the pages of history. The ones who never wrote their names, but carved them into the earth with each step they took. The ones whose bones lie beneath fields that still grow grain. The ones whose stories end without fanfare, but who mattered deeply to someone. There's something strangely comforting in the idea that the past keeps sleeping beneath us. That time folds over itself like a heavy blanket, and that when we close our eyes, we might for a while walk through those old villages again. Hear the crackle of a fire. Taste warm gruel on a cold morning. Watch the wind curl through the thatch. So breathe slowly now. Let your thoughts soften. Let your body grow still. You've traveled far through mud and frost and fear. You've worked the frozen fields, carried burdens, buried neighbors, dreamed of freedom, and now, finally, you rest. Outside, the stars wheel in silence above Saxony. The forest breathes. The chapel bell sweeps. And somewhere in the night, the wind carries a name no one remembers, but someone once spoke with love. You are safe now. You are warm. And the world for this moment is quiet. Let sleep take you, gently and without worry. And may you wake rested, far from the fields. Thank you for drifting through history with us. If you enjoyed this quiet journey into the past, gently tap subscribe and let the drowsy historian be your guide whenever sleep feels far away. Until next time, rest well, dream deeper, and remember, history is never in a hurry.